Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku was born with talent, and also had the most powerful quirk in the recorded history, Deku X Momo, Part 1. So before we start, please go check out the author of this fanfic, CzereLion. Link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's begin the video. Kyudai Garaki, also known as Daruma Ijiko, was looking through the results of Izuku Midoriya, a little kid with green hair who came just yesterday with his mother. The fact that he still needed to keep his cover, as one of the highest-ranking members of the League of Villains, infuriated him to no end. Luckily he was a patient man, he always was. His quirk allowed him to be one. It had been many years since he stopped counting his birthdays, so he could handle a few more years, as a pediatrician, and the board chairman of Jaku Hospital, until All for One took care of All Might, and he would have all the resources he could even imagine to continue his research, just as he was promised. Today was a long day. He had at least 50 patients come to visit him, and an extreme amount of paperwork to take care of, so it came as no surprise that it took him so long to take a look at the test results of the young green-haired kid. To say that they were interesting would be a massive understatement. His x-rays showed that his pinky toe had only a single joint, yet the boy hasn't shown any signs of his quirk yet, so he did what any other doctor would, took some blood samples, and sent them on their way. This is where it started getting weird. The lab did 2 DNA tests, and they were both completely different. Kyudai called to the lab, and forced them to do another one, and again it came slightly different. So he went to the lab himself, and did the tests twice on a single sample, but again they were different. Kyudai couldn't believe his eyes. He had never seen anything like this before. Not even the most extreme gene therapy could cause something like this. This had to be the work of the boy's quirk. But that still didn't answer the most important question. What was this quirk's function? The doctor did every possible test he could think of, but the sample did not react in any interesting or unusual way. He decided to give up, and put the blood sample back into the tray. What he didn't realize was that the test tube which held the blood sample got slick from the sweat on his hand, and just as he was about to put it on the table it slipped between his fingers, and shattered on the ground of the lab. Kyudai cursed under his breath, and reached his hand to pick up the ruined vial, when suddenly he was hit by something that felt like static electricity. It was a feeling similar to one that someone gets when touching a doorknob after walking on carpet and socks. He recoiled his hand on instinct, and wondered if this was the quirk purpose, to generate electricity from changes within genetic material. He picked up a dropper, and took in a bit of Izuku's blood, and once again repeated the test, and he was once again baffled when the DNA changed even more drastically. The doctor then had the idea to compare the newest sample to his own DNA test result from a few years back. He was shocked to see how similar those two looked in just a few seconds. Kyudai spent the rest of the night making calculation after calculation, and computer simulation after simulation until he found out the truth. Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Gene manipulation. Izuku's genome constantly transforms in order to enable his body to use quirks of other people he touches. Unfortunately this process takes about 4 years to finish since he touches the quirk user. The changes are however permanent. The doctor was immediately reminded of All for One for his similar quirk. But there was also a major difference. Excluding the substantial period Izuku needed for his quirk to work, the genes of the copied person were not harmed, allowing the potential victim the use of their quirk after the transformation. He couldn't even imagine the possibilities of what could happen if All for One took this quirk from the small child. There wouldn't be anyone strong enough to ever threaten him again if both quirks combined. They could create an entire army of extremely powerful villains. There was absolutely no way the League of Villains could pass the opportunity such as this one. 2 days later, Midoriya residence. Izuku finally fell into a deep sleep from the exhaustion caused by his crying. His mother was sitting next to his bed watching him with sadness clearly visible on her face. "I am so sorry, Izuku." Those words were still resonating within her head. She felt like crying again, but she held back her tears in fear of waking Izuku up again. She felt so defeated, because she knew that her son just lived through the worst day of his life, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to help him. She thought about fate, and how cruel it could be to take the chance of being a hero from someone as pure-hearted and determined as her son. She slowly brushed his head with her fingers to ease his sleep while he lay there still clutching his favorite All Might action figure tightly in his arms, taking in slow deep breaths. After about 20 minutes Inko felt her eyes begin to close, so she leaned in and gave him a soft kiss on the cheek before leaving her son's bedroom. She fell asleep very quickly, but at that time it didn't occur to her that tiredness and emotional exhaustion weren't the only things which affected her, but also a tasteless and scentless gas, slowly filling the house. After 5 more minutes 2 masked men entered the house quietly, snuck into Izuku's room, picked him up, and carried him to the black SUV outside, before driving swiftly away. 2 hours later, League of Villains hideout. Izuku woke up with a start. He immediately started frantically looking around himself, confused by his surroundings. The room he was in could be best described as a cell with both the floor and the walls made of steel, and the ceiling made of cement. There were no windows, just a metal door on the other side of the room across from his bed, which looked like it was stolen straight from a hospital. There was also a toilet in the corner of the room. "Mom?" he said, as his hands started shaking, nearly dropping his All Might action figure. Just as the word left his mouth, a blue light on one of the walls, which he never even noticed, turned red suddenly. "Looks like the little rat's awake. You should go do something about that," said one voice from the other room. "Why the hell should it be me? I had to carry him there." "It's your turn." "Fine." Izuku heard heavy steps slowly coming closer to the door, and he was frozen with fear. "They will come in here and hurt me." The steps got closer. "What should I do? What would Kaken do?" The steps got even closer. Izuku looked at his hero in his arms. "What would All Might do?" The steps stopped on the other side of the door. "He wouldn't give up. He never gives up. He always fights." He quickly thought about how to defend himself when he noticed the toilet tank, and ran with his All Might figure to it. He gently, but quickly sat his hero on the toilet before lifting the cover with all his strength, and nearly falling over from the heavy weight of it. But his legs refused to give up, and he braced the weight with his tiny shoulder. "Damn it! Where is that goddamn keycard? You are holding it in our left hand, idiot." "Oh right." Izuku closed his eyes, and prepared for the worst. He waited for the sound of the door opening, but it never came. Instead there was a different sound. One he knew very well. Smash! The entire building shook, as if it was hit by an earthquake. Izuku acted on instinct, let go of the toilet tank cover, dove under the hospital bed, and covered his head with his tiny hands, shut his eyes, just like his mother taught him. He waited there for the room around him to collapse, but that never happened. Instead there came a deep voice. "Well, let's see what's behind door number 70. The room shook once again, as the large metal doors were torn clean off by a massive figure clad in blue, red, white, and yellow spandex. All Might peered into the cell, and saw a small child covering in fear under a bed, as well as a miniature of himself sitting on the toilet in the corner. "Wait, what's that about? All Might?" He was pulled from his confusion when he heard the shaky voice, and hurried closer before leaning under the bed only to see 2 green orbs filled to the brim with tears staring straight back at him. He felt his heart swell up with anger as he saw the kid, yet he didn't let the negative emotion ruin his wide, brave smile. "So you are kidnapping children now, all for one? Ha ha! Have no fear, because I am here," he said cheerfully, as he flexed his muscles on one of his arms, while using the other to lift up the bed. The small green-haired child just continued to stare at him with both his eyes and his mouth wide open. "Kid, are you alright?" he said, as he began waving his hand in front of the kid's face to snap him out of his shock. "Kid, can you hear?" He was stopped, as the green-haired boy suddenly jumped, and grabbed him around the neck in a crushing hug, or at least what he assumed was the child's version of a crushing hug. "Oh my god, I am your biggest fan. I watched your debut a million times, and your fight with Gum Bandit 7 years ago was the best. Can I get an autograph? And also one for my friend Kaken? Please, 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 pretty please. So cute." Toshinori slowly and carefully closed his own giant arms around the little boy, ignoring the light tingle of electricity he felt as he did so. Yeah, this feeling never got old no matter how many times he lived through it. The feeling of pure adoration, respect, and maybe even some kind of love he felt when helping people in dangerous situations. It was the one thing that kept him going even after his master's death. It gave him courage, kept him determined, kept him all might. "Of course, young man, but first we have to get you out of here." The giant of a man slowly stood up while keeping one of his massive hands on Izuku's back to keep him from falling. He then walked to the toilet, and pointed with his free hand at the toy still sitting on the toilet bowl. "Is this yours?" Izuku followed Toshinori's gaze, and turned bright red when he realized that he left the little hero in such an embarrassing position. "Sorry, All Might." The big hero just gave him one of his signature laughs before grabbing the toy with his free hand, and heading out of the cell, and into the mostly empty, dimly lit hallways of All for One's complex hideout. Meanwhile, Gran Torino was flying from wall to wall searching for his former student, followed closely by Recovery Girl and Sir Night-Eye. "Where did that big oaf run off to?" said Recovery Girl, as she was barely able to keep up with the two heroes, while both of them were surprised that she was so vital even in her old age. She was slowly getting more and more angry. First they show up at her office unannounced in the middle of the night, and start banging on her door, waking all of her patients in the process, only to tell her that Toshinori has gone after All for One all by himself, and that if they didn't find him, he would get injured so badly that he wouldn't be able to continue working as a pro. "We have to keep looking," If what I saw becomes true, he will surely need our help, Night Eye responded. His grim vision was still fresh in his mind, he just couldn't get the image of All Might lying in the pool of his own blood from his head. Yeah, listen to the fanboy, Chio. All for One is more than prepared for him, said Gran Torino, as he knocked out 2 small-time villains the moment they came into the hallway. Toshinori, please don't do anything stupid. 1 minute, and 14 seconds later. Where is that exit? I am sure it was this way. I have to get that kid to safety before I run into someone too dangerous. Now All Might was by no means a coward, but fighting while holding a kid that couldn't be more than 5 years old in one hand, and the kid's toy in the other one seemed like something so dangerous and stupid he cringed at what his teacher would do to him before he even reached the afterlife. Did you get lost in All Might? Oh crap. Before he even had time to respond, a dozen long spears made of pure energy were sent flying straight at him. Thanks to quick thinking he was able to dodge them save for the All Might doll which got impaled through the head and stuck to the nearby wall. Oh, would you look at that? You broke the toy of a child that you are trying to protect. Maybe you should save yourself the trouble and die already, All for One said, as he fired a brand new set of spears straight at All Might. Toshinori didn't waste any time, as he shot a Texas smash with his free hand at Shigaraki, and jumped backwards before ducking behind the corner with energy spears flying straight past him. That new quirk of his will be hard to deal with. I need to close the distance, but first. Okay kid, time to get off. He said, as he leaned over and tried to let go of the kid that was still hugging him. But the little boy didn't even budge. Come on kid, I can't fight with you hanging around. That's when he noticed that the boy was shivering like crazy, blinking rapidly, and burning up. A seizure? All Might then forcefully tried to remove the boy in order to lay him down, but simply couldn't pry the child off. What are you? A spider monkey? Just then he heard a step from behind, and felt an extreme pain shoot up his left arm. He grunted, and found one of All for One's spears sticking out of his left elbow. All Might turned around, and delivered a punch with his right fist to Shigaraki's chest, which sent the white-haired man flying straight through the wall. For a second Toshinori thought about going after him, but ultimately decided against it. The child needed some medical care, and that had much bigger priority than revenge. And so the symbol of peace and justice did something he had never done before. He retreated after smashing a hole in the ceiling, and jumping through it to the higher floor of the basement. It didn't take more than just 10 seconds of running, until the sole of a white shoe made contact with his face. Gran Torino looked absolutely furious. So scary. What the hell were you thinking, you big newbie? You could have been killed. One for All would be lost forever, and, is that a child? Recovery Girl interrupted the old hero veteran, and rushed over to All Might. I found him in a room downstairs. I think he's having a seizure, and he is sort of strangling me, Toshinori said, and began to wheeze a bit from the boy's strong grip. Recovery Girl gave All Might a kiss on his arm, and then one to the back of Izuku's head, and quickly recoiled from the feeling of static electricity rushing to her lips. Izuku immediately let go of Toshinori, and fell into the awaiting arms of Sir Night Eye, only for him to also feel a jolt travel up his right arm, yet he chose to ignore it. I'm going back, said All Might suddenly to the surprise of everyone present. Please All Might, listen. This is not a fight you can win on your own. You will die if you fight him today, yelled Night Eye. I cannot allow him to escape again, not after what he did to Nana. Toshinori responded determinedly without any hint of fear in his voice. The group was taken over by silence. They stood there looking at each other for what felt like eternity, until finally Gran Torino sighed, and spoke up. He's right, you cannot do this on your own. I will go with you. Can't you see that this is? But before he could finish his sentence, Sir Night Eye was interrupted by a loud rumble which sent the entire building shaking. He lost his balance, and let go of Izuku, who was still unconscious just as the entire floor ruptured beneath, swallowing them all into complete darkness. When Night Eye came back to consciousness, he slowly opened his yellow eyes hidden beneath a pair of broken glasses. There were a few fires around him on the ground, illuminating the entire cavern-like area they were in. His head was throbbing painfully, and when he reached for it he found drops of blood on his fingers which quickly brought him from his delirious state. The hero in a gray business suit slowly and painfully got back on his feet, and looked at Gran Torino lying a few feet from him with some debris on his back. Night Eye walked over to him, and began digging him out with his bare hands, which by the end were also bloody and shaking from exhaustion. But the little old man was still breathing, and had a strong heartbeat. He looked around for Recovery Girl, but couldn't find her anywhere. The wall on the other side of the room suddenly shattered, as All Might's bloodied and battered body was thrown into a nearby pile of rubble. But he got up quickly, and ran back through the hole that his body just created. In that room he saw Shigaraki getting closer to the green-haired boy with his hand raised, and little red flames dancing on his palm. The white-haired man was just dead set on taking the little boy's quirk. "Oh no you don't," Toshinori yelled with fury, and readied another smash only for the villain to swiftly disappear in what could only be described as black liquid just before the punch could make an impact. All Might was caught off guard when All for One reappeared a moment later with what could only be described as extremely long sharp bones protruding from where his right arm used to be. All Might failed to react in time, as the bones buried deep in his left side only to be then swiftly pulled back, leaving him with a big bloody empty hole where his guts used to be. Toshinori promptly fell on the ground clutching his side in absolute agony. "You heroes are all the same. Idiotic dreamers with way too much power in their disposal. But with this child's quirk I will change that, and when I finish extracting what I need from him, I will tear him apart to bloody pieces in front of your very eyes just to show you how little of a value one's life has in this world," All for One yelled, as he made his way to Izuku. Izuku's eyes were still closed when he heard slow steps approaching. He wasn't sure why, but he was filled with immeasurable dread. Then the memories came rushing back to him. He remembered waking up in the small cell, scared and alone. He remembered the horror he felt when those two men slowly got closer to the door, but he also remembered the relief and amazement he felt when he saw All Might's big smile. The steps stopped. "All Might!" He quickly opened his eyes only to see a white-haired man with his hand, which glowed with dark red fire, reaching for his forehead. "Go away!" he weakly shouted, as he grabbed the man's wrist once again, shutting his own eyes. Then came a flash of green light, and probably the most disgusting sound Izuku has ever heard in his entire life. It was something between a squelch and a crack, with an equally disgusting noise of something wet and soft falling on the ground, which followed soon after. He opened his eyes only to see the man's hand reduced to a bloody mess, which also covered the fingers on Izuku's own hand. "Not yet. It's not your time yet. There is still more you need to do. Don't give up. You can't give up now. Breathe. Move. Get up. Fight. Protect him. Be a hero." All Might slowly got back up on his knees, then on his feet, ignoring the agonizing pain which came with his every movement. All for One's face twisted in both pain and anger, as he raised his arm made of sharp bones ready to bring it down on the little boy before him. Yet he was interrupted by a furious roar coming from behind. Just as he turned around, he witnessed All Might charging at him at full speed, roaring with some of his bloody entrails left behind him. It was an image he would always remember, as the last one he ever saw with his own eyes. "United States of Smash!" Toshinori yelled with anger, as his fist made contact with Shigaraki's skull, destroying his face and the bones beneath it, driving his head into the ground. After a few shallow breaths, All Might could feel his energy rapidly running out until he lost his balance and fell on his back right next to his arch-nemesis. He didn't even notice it when All for One's body became enveloped in black mist and disappeared. Izuku swiftly stood up and rushed over to All Might, lying in a pool of his own blood. "I did this. This is all my fault." He fell onto his knees and wrapped his tiny arms around Toshinori's massive bicep. "I am so sorry, All Might. Please get up." The big hero's breathing stopped. No, "Please, All Might, you can't die here," Izuku said, as tears once again filled his eyes. Toshinori's heart stopped beating. "Please, someone, anyone, help him. He's dying," Izuku said weakly, and began to sob, as he buried his head into his hero's shoulder. "Oh my goodness, what happened to him?" yelled Recovery Girl, as she ran over to where she heard the small boy crying his eyes out. "Please help," said Izuku, covered from head to toe in his hero's blood in between his sobs. She gently picked him up and sat him down a few feet away to get a closer look at Toshinori's condition. Once she saw the huge hole in All Might's belly and sternum, she immediately knew that there was absolutely nothing that could be done. Even if she used her quirk, it would only make his death faster. At that moment, Recovery Girl felt completely useless. She stood up and decided to go check on the boy. For all she knew, some of that blood on him could have been his own, and she wasn't going to lose two people due to her incompetence. But then she saw it. Movement. The wound began to slowly close itself. She was completely flabbergasted to see, as the wound got smaller, and fresh pink skin began to appear on the uncovered flesh, leaving a huge scar. She turned her attention back on the boy, who was still crying just next to her. "What did you do?" Izuku Midoriya. Quirk. Gene Manipulation plus Ultra. When Izuku's own quirk combined with One for All, it further strengthened his own ability. Izuku's genome can now instantly transform, which allows him to use the quirk of anyone he touches in just a few seconds. Furthermore, newly gained quirk is also further enhanced by One for All, bringing it past its natural limits. Izuku was just quietly sitting in the front seat of a police car. Officers were everywhere, searching the entire area around Shigaraki's hideout and arresting minor villains with help of heroes that had arrived with them. The small green-haired boy caught a glimpse of paramedics loading All Might into an ambulance, but quickly averted his eyes in shame before also being driven to the hospital. After being led to a shower by a few kind nurses, and getting clean clothes that someone donated to the hospital, he was feeling much better, even though he couldn't get the image of his hero bloody and hurt from his head. A nice tall pediatrician checked his body, and concluded that the boy was completely fine save for a few scratches, which he promptly treated. "It's all my fault." He looked at the hands resting in his lap, as he sat. They were still trembling, and he couldn't stop them no matter what he did. He could still feel the blood on his hands. How could I hurt someone like that? Even though he was probably a villain no one deserves to. Izuku. The small boy was quickly enveloped in a tight hug by his mother. "Oh my god, baby, are you okay? No one hurt you, did they?" she asked in horror, as Izuku started sobbing in her embrace. "You must be the boy's mother." "I am Detective Tsukachi, we talked over the phone," said a smiling young tall man wearing a beige trench coat and a hat, as he approached them calmly. "Yes, thank you so much for finding my son. I couldn't live with myself if anything were to happen to him," Inko said with tears in the corners of her green eyes. "You don't need to worry, the doctor has already informed me that your son is perfectly healthy." "Oh, thank God, so you must be the Izuku that I've heard so much about," the young detective said, as he crouched in front of the little boy while still smiling. The child didn't react in any way, just stared blankly at the man before him. "Is All Might going to be okay?" Izuku asked sadly, to which the man's smile broadened. "Well, he regained consciousness half an hour ago, and has been asking everyone the same thing, only about you. And since now I have some good news for him, why don't you come with me so you can tell him yourself?" Both Izuku and his mother looked shocked. "He isn't mad at me?" the young boy asked shyly while clutching the fabric of his new shorts, which were 2 sizes too big. The detective's face showed a look of surprise for a minute, before he leaned in a bit closer to Izuku, making the boy a bit uncomfortable. "Mad? It's possible you might have saved his life with your quirk." "I saved All Might? Wait, I have a quirk?" But I don't have a quirk." The detective looked a little taken aback by Izuku's answer. It was pretty common for someone to have their quirk wrongly diagnosed or misunderstood, but it has been several since he has last heard about someone being wrongly diagnosed as quirkless. Also, why would All for One kidnap someone without a quirk he could steal? It simply didn't add up at all. "Tell me, Miss Midoriya, when did Izuku have his quirk examined?" "It was 3 days ago, but we got his results just yesterday." "Why do you ask?" Inko asked, troubled. The detective's smile quickly returned, as he shook his head a bit. "Oh, no real reason, I was just curious." "Well then, Izuku, would you like to see All Might?" Izuku quickly nodded his head, as an innocent excited smile appeared on his face. Naomasa quickly waved over a fellow officer with a feline head, who was just walking through the hallway with a cup of coffee in his hand. "Please take them to the VIP." The officer understood, and led the small family to the nearest elevator, while Tsukachi pulled out his phone, through which he quickly accessed the quirk registration database, and downloaded a file on Izuku Midoriya. When he read it, and discovered that Izuku Midoriya was indeed documented as quirkless, Tsukachi took a look at the person who filled the report, and dialed the office. "Hi, it's me. What information do you have about Dr. Daruma Ujiko?" All Might's hospital room a minute later. "So am I fine?" Toshinori asked while sitting on his hospital bed, which was straining from his enormous weight. Recovery Girl was walking from one end of the room to the other, still looking at the images from his CT scan. "I am not sure that fine best describes your state. Take a look at this," she said, as she pushed 2 pictures into his hands. "Here is your big intestine before the incident yesterday, and here after the incident. I don't see the difference," All Might began before being slapped upside the head with rolled up papers by the angry doctor. "Of course you don't, you big oaf. Your appendix is back." "Oh hey, you're right, but I had it removed when I was 12. Toshinori could still remember the horrible pain that he felt when his parents drove him to hospital that day. "And do you remember that time, when you broke your rib during your combat training? Now it's like it never even happened," Recovery Girl said, as she showed him another black and white picture. "But what does this mean? I am not sure myself. The only thing I can tell you for certain is that your entire body shows the same improvements. You have a perfect cholesterol level, and blood sugar. You have lost a few pounds, your teeth are all healthy, and without a single filling, and you have the cleanest lungs, and the healthiest liver that I have ever seen in someone of your age. I would even go as far as to bet my doctor's license that you are the healthiest person in this entire building, including the newborns." The little energetic old lady took a deep breath, as she finished talking. "Guess that kid's quirk is pretty powerful," said Toshinori, as he began to scratch at his side. "Doesn't that hurt at all?" she asked, looking worried. "No, it just started itching like crazy. Let me take a look," Recovery Girl said, as she hurried over to him, as All Might lifted up his hospital gown a bit to allow her a better access to his tingly area. The youthful heroine took one look, and took a step back in surprise. Even the scar is gone now. This was biologically impossible. The injury All Might suffered might cripple even most of the people who were born with super regeneration, since most of them could never even hope to regrow more than a couple of fingers, much less important organs. Just as she was about to launch into an entirely new speech about why this should be completely impossible, there was a knock on the door. "You can come in," said Toshinori, as he jumped from the bed, which creaked menacingly, back to his feet so fast he nearly slipped on the polished floor. The door opened, and a green-haired child he saved before, and who he could only assume was the child's mother, slowly and carefully walked in. Izuku gasped a little when he saw All Might standing in the room dressed in white hospital gown and light pink pants, but tears quickly filled his eyes as he let go of his mother's hand and gave All Might's muscular leg a tight hug. Toshinori's heart fluttered a little, as if it was failing to comprehend this much cuteness. "Izuku, you can't do that to strangers," Inko said, as she rushed over to her son with intention to pull him off the #1 hero. But before she could do anything, All Might stopped her. "It's no big deal, madam. I am used to it," he said with his ever-present smile. He carefully bent down and picked the child up, but quickly discovered tears in Izuku's eyes, and fear swiftly overtook him. "Crap, I hope I didn't hurt him." "Hey, young man, what's wrong?" he asked in worry, his eyes scanning the child for any injury he might have touched. "I am so sorry." The boy was forced out in between his sobs. "Sorry? What could you possibly feel sorry for, young Midoriya?" Toshinori asked, as he softly placed the child back on the ground and took a knee before him. The emotion of pure excitement from the thought, "All Might knows my name," was quickly smashed to the dirt by the wagon of guilt still parked in the forest of shame which was still growing inside of Izuku's head. "It's my fault that you got injured. If those villains didn't take me, you wouldn't get hurt, and—" "Toot toot, stop there, little one," All Might interrupted suddenly, as he gently pushed the boy's nose 2 times, imitating a klaxon on a steering wheel. The effect was instant. Izuku was so taken back he stopped crying, and started blushing a bit. "Listen to me, young man. If it weren't for you, there is a good chance I wouldn't be here now talking to you. Believe it or not, today you and your quirk saved my life, and if that is not something to be proud about, I don't know what is," said Toshinori, as he carefully patted the child's head. "Thank you, All Might," whispered Izuku, as a small innocent smile found its way back on his way. "Now I believe I owe you an autograph," the big man exclaimed, as he grabbed a pen and a few pages of paper. "To Izuku Midoriya, the boy who single-handedly saved my life, and one of the greatest heroes of the future generation. Signed, All Might." Izuku looked shocked at his hero, with his mouth slightly gaping, and his eyes filled with adoration. "Can I be a hero?" He took a wobbly step forward, and with his shaky tiny hands grasped the piece of paper offered to him, and gave All Might one big last hug. Inko gently took her son's hand into her own. She was so proud of her little boy. Just to be acknowledged by All Might was impressive on its own, but to save said hero was simply incredible. At that moment she swore to herself that she would do anything to help her son achieve his dream, whatever it was. Just as they were about to leave the room, Izuku stopped in his tracks, and turned around. "All Might, my friend Kachin has his birthday in 2 weeks. Could you write another autograph for him?" Smiling Toshinori didn't even respond, he just reached for his pen and paper again. Izuku couldn't sleep, but really, could anyone blame him? After everything that happened yesterday, he was simply too excited to close his eyes for more than just a few seconds before quickly opening them again, and gazing at every single one of the All Mights displayed in his room. The hospital decided to keep him under observation until the evening. While there, both him and his mother were visited by the nice detective who asked them to not talk about what happened in the early morning to anyone just yet, to make sure that the investigation goes smoothly. Izuku felt as if he just came back from a top-secret assignment, which only added to his excitement. One of the greatest heroes of the future generation. Those words still resonated in his mind, filling him with energy and determination. "If he believes in me, I can do it, but it will be super hard." At the hospital. "Are you sure about this, Night Eye?" Toshinori asked with a bit of regret in his voice. Night Eye has been his sidekick for many years, so it came as a shock when he was handed a resignation letter with a new costume. The man in formal clothing pushed up his glasses with one of his bandaged hands before nodding his head firmly. "I am sorry, All Might, but I just can't continue being your sidekick after what happened yesterday. Your poor judgment nearly cost us all our lives," he said sadly. "Please understand it was a hot lead on the guy, and he could have gotten away again if I know all that. I know how important that mission was for you, but on that day I saw you lying on the ground in the pool of your own blood, and that's an image I just can't get out of my head. Night Eye all, but shouted at his idol. Toshinori was shocked when he saw the younger man display so many emotions. But it's not your fault. I know, but I saw you lying there, dying, and I was unable to prevent it from happening. Night Eye locked eyes with the tall muscular man in the hospital gown with small tears threatening to fall from his eyes. He took a deep breath to compose himself. Even if that never happens again, I wouldn't be able to live through that feeling again. Not as a hero, not as your fan, and definitely not as your friend. I am so sorry, All Might, he said, as he hung his head. Then the shorter man felt a weight on his shoulder. He looked up to see his hero standing closer to him holding his shoulder. I understand what you mean, and I accept your resignation, All Might said reassuringly before offering Night Eye his hand, and a smile. After a quick hesitation he accepted his friend's hand, and gave it a firm shake. It has been an honor working with you, All Might. And it has also been a great honor working with you, Mirai Sasaki. Toshinori responded before letting go. Night Eye gave his favorite hero a small smile before turning around, and leaving the hospital room. Toshinori sighed, and took a seat on his bed, putting the costume on the ground in front of himself. He looked at the red, blue, white, and yellow spandex in silence, thinking about what he had to go through to reach his current status. Now he probably lost one of his closest friends, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to get him back. But it was all worth it, right? His thoughts were interrupted with a knock on the door. When they opened he was met by the friendly face of Naomasa Tsukachi. Good morning, Toshinori, said the detective, as he took off his hat, and took a seat in front of the large man. Oh, hello Naomasa, any news? Of course, all of them are bad, said the man in a trench coat, which made All Might flinch a bit. For one, we searched all throughout the complex, but didn't find Shigaraki's body anywhere. We also discovered that the boy you saved had his quirk examined 2 days just before he got kidnapped. I sent some officers to bring in the doctor who did the tests for questioning, but his apartment was completely abandoned when they got there. This gives us 2 versions of the story: either Daruma Ijiko has been kidnapped and replaced by an imposter, or he was actively supporting All for One and went into hiding when he found out what happened yesterday. Which means that All for One is probably not only still alive, but that he has someone who specialized on studying quirks his entire life, and had access to the quirk registry. Toshinori frowned, as he was dealt another supply of bad news by another of his few friends. I've already started preparations to add both Shigaraki and Daruma on the Interpol Most Wanted list, but it will take a few days for that to go through, said the detective regretfully. He knew just how much trouble these people could bring, but there was nothing more that could be done at the moment. What about the boy and his family? Asked All Might with a hint of worry in his voice. They should both be fine, as long as this doesn't reach the public. And I've sent 2 of my officers to watch their apartment building for a few days just to be sure, responded Naomasa calmly, which made All Might sigh in relief. After they discussed some minor details, the detective left the hospital, and Toshinori did the same, but instead of using the main entrance he chose to jump off the roof into the night sky. The next day, Izuku was full of energy despite getting only a few hours of sleep during the night. He was happily jumping around the house dressed in his small All Might costume. At one point he even ran into the kitchen where his mother was cutting the vegetables for lunch while yelling, I am here for a free samp. Inko quickly interrupted by showing a baby carrot into his open mouth with a smile. Afanku fitafen. He quickly responded before running outside with a full mouth and a wide smile. He still couldn't believe that he finally had a quirk, and a great one. What could be better than helping to save lives? Lunch came and went. Then came the moment for computer time. Izuku watched his favorite hero video, and then some recent hero footage, only to see his own face next to a headline. He quickly jumped off the chair, ran to his mom, and led her to the computer to show her with sparkles in his big green eyes. But the excitement that he expected to see on her mother's face never came. Her smile vanished, and her eyes opened wide with shock and horror as she read the headline. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who saved the #1 hero. Unbeknownst to them, the #1 hero was also reading the same tabloid article whilst frowning. Vultures. This is really bad. When the villains get a hold of this, the boy is as good as dead. It had little to no information except for the people involved. But the real question was, how did the reporters even get their hands on this info? And how the hell is it in the magazines already? All Might crushed the angering magazine into a tight ball, and threw it into a blue trash can nearby before leaping back into the air again with a new destination in mind. Back in the apartment there was constant knocking on the door, and ringing of the doorbell after multiple news vans, and other vehicles with bright logos of news companies painted on them parked in front of the building. Inko wasn't very sure about what she should do. Is it okay to call the police? How did they even get our address? Then it all suddenly stopped, and, as the silence overtook the room, she felt a small hand on her leg. Mom! Mom! Look! All Might's outside. She followed her son to a window he was so furiously pointing at. The young woman looked outside, and there he was. The number one hero was standing in the street, as more and more reporters surrounded him. And was he slowly moving away? Her phone rang out of nowhere, and she picked it up. Hello? Miss Midoriya, this is Detective Scotchy. We met at the hospital. I need you to pack a bag for yourself, and for your... Wait a minute, what do you mean pack a bag? We can't just... Please listen to me. I can't guarantee your safety if you stay where you are. And I don't know how much time All Might can buy you. There are 2 officers in a gray car just down the road. Pack your bags, and get into that car. They will take you to a safe destination. I promise it's only temporary. I understand. She was a bit shaken by what she heard, but ended the call, grabbed a big suitcase, and started hastily filling it up with Izuku's help. Outside. And so honor is something everyone should strive to achieve, said smiling Toshinori, as he took another step back, and everyone moved with him. All Might, that doesn't answer my question at all. Were you really saved by Izuku Midoriya yesterday? The reporter asked again with clear irritation in her voice. It was almost as if all the number one hero said was either complete nonsense or random catchphrases. Oh, and have I ever told you about the time when I saved those seniors from that burning building? I always flamed to please. Ha ha ha! Everyone groaned audibly at the bad pun, and completely missed the car behind them, as it quickly drove off. Well, that's my K, you have all been great, but the heroine waits for no one, he said, and quickly sprinted away in a blur, leaving all of the reporters both angry and disappointed. But when they resumed their attempts to interview the small family, they found their apartment empty. 15 minutes later, they drove them to the police station where Naomasa was already waiting in his office. Izuku was left in care of a few young policewomen, who were all resisting the urge to pinch his cheeks due to his cuteness, while his mother spoke to the detective. After a few minutes of explaining that no one had any idea about the source of the information leak, and that there was no way to tell how long this investigation could take, he came with a proposition. The young detective pointed at a computer screen. So after this article went viral, our witness protection program became pretty much useless in your case. Simply put, there isn't a place in this country where we could successfully hide you or your son. Inko was so devastated and scared. For the second time in her life, she was completely clueless about what she should do. Now her son was in serious danger, and it was all her fault. If only she stopped those villains from kidnapping her little Izuku. If only she could have known. But thankfully there is another option available. Now this option would grant both you and your son a chance to live your lives in relative comfort and complete safety. But it would be pretty hard to get used to. I accept, she said, as her hands began to shake a little. But she was determined to go through anything at this point. Naomasa smiled a bit, and stood up from his chair, and grabbed a folder on a nearby file cabinet. As you may know, the Hero Association launched a custom program for people just like you. The media call it the Move in Protection Program, where a family in danger lives with a professional hero. Only a handful of families have gone into this program, but so far it's had a success rate of 100%. So we would move in with a hero until the investigation gets concluded. That's right, the said hero has a perfect record, and they will be compensated for any added expenses during your stay. Inko was surprised to say the least. Not only would they be kept safe by a pro, but they wouldn't even have to be worried about paying the rent. And would it be okay if you told me which hero would be protecting us? She asked nervously, not wanting to inconvenience the kind man standing in front of her. The detective's smile just grew wider as he handed her the folder. Inko audibly gasped when she saw the photo of the large blonde hero with a brave smile looking at her from the photo attached to the first page. So how can I help you, Toshinori? Asked Recovery Girl when she arrived at All Might's giant penthouse. Miss Shizenji, I am so glad you are here. You see, some people will be moving in with me, and I need someone to check if there are any healthcare hazards. He said with his usual ear-to-ear smile, as he came to meet the doctor dressed in his bright red t-shirt with just a hero in disguise, written on it with big bright yellow letters. The Recovery Girl frowned at him, and almost decided to leave. She was worried that this urgent business meant that his condition had worsened. She sighed, and furrowed her brow. Just show me the kitchen, she said exasperatedly, as she stepped inside, just hoping it wouldn't take too much of her time. Right this way, young lady, he responded cheerily, as she entered his apartment before discreetly picking up a clipboard and holding behind his back just from her sight. 10 minutes later outside. Officer, are you sure this is the right place? Inko asked nervously when the police car stopped in front of an entrance to a massive skyscraper. It's what the order said, ma'am. Do you want any help with your luggage? Asked the bearded policeman. Yes, that would be very nice of you, she told him with a slight smile, to which the officer gently nodded, got out of the car, and easily pulled 2 heavy stroller cases out of the car trunk, while Inko gently freed her son from his seatbelt and opened the door for him. and for herself. There was no mistaking it, this building was luxurious. It was a kind of place where even if you were to rent the cheapest room for a week it would still cost you about as much as you make in a year. Izuku was still holding his mother's skirt as they walked to the elevator, after being told by a friendly receptionist that they should go to the second highest floor. Once in the moving metal box she noticed just how incredibly nervous her son was. The young boy stood there shivering, unblinking, and sweating profusely. "Izuku, are you feeling okay?" she asked gently when she softly placed her hands on his shoulders and got down on his eye level. Her son stopped shaking and silently averted his eyes. "Are you sure he won't be angry with us?" he asked weakly in response while looking at the ground. His mother smiled reassuringly at him. "Sweetie, I am sure it will be fine. Remember what the nice policeman said? All Might has volunteered himself." Her son gave her a small unsure smile and returned just as the door opened, and they got out of the elevator into a small hallway with only one door on the side across from them. Inko was reaching for the handle when the door opened on its own, and a tiny old lady burst out nearly bumping into her. "Oh, you must be the boy's mother," she exclaimed, as she looked up at her, and then at the child standing beside her, and then something in her clicked. "Wait a moment, come here, sonny," she said, as she gently grasped Izuku's tiny hand, and spun him around before standing back to back with the small boy, and comparing their height. While the boy was so taken aback he didn't even try to question it. Just as she thought, the child was just half an inch shorter. 20 minutes earlier, the old lady came into the kitchen, and immediately saw a foot-sized ketchup stain on the floor. It looked fresh and sticky. When she asked where he kept his cleaning chemicals he pointed to the nearest set of drawers, and when she opened one of them, the bottle was just out of her reach. Same thing happened when she tried to return a knife. She found just randomly sitting on a chair to its former place, and the detergent. And each time something like that happened she caught Toshinori moving from the corner of her eye very quickly. But before she could take a good look he was already standing perfectly still with his dumb smile. Was he testing? A small pulsating vein suddenly appeared on Chiyo's forehead, and started angrily pulsating, as she turned around, and walked with quick steps filled with determination back into the penthouse, coming face to face with the number one hero. "Oh, sorry, All Might. It seems that I forgot my god, there is a huge spider on your shoulder." "Where?" he exclaimed, and quickly turned around exposing the hidden item, which she snatched from him at blinding speed. Toshinori just stared at her with a pale face, as she read the paper attached to it. Plus Ultra Child Reachability Safety Test, Cleaning Supplies check, Knives and other sharp objects check, Uncovered electricity sockets check, Laundry detergent check, Toaster check, Coffee check, Spices check, Medicine check, Adult stuff check. "Oh no, she knows. Yagi." But before she could finish talking All Might quickly ran out of the door at near sonic speed, jumping over the stunned family, and dashing down the stairs next to the elevator with Recovery Girl hot on his heels. "You can run, but you can't hide. I am your doctor, and I know where you live," she yelled in pursuit. The green-haired boy gently pulled at his mother's skirt. "What is going on, Mommy? Is All Might scared?" His mother didn't have any time to respond. As a window in the hallway opened, both of her suitcases were suddenly yanked away, and carried inside by a red blur. "I think I lost her at the 16th floor. Quickly get in before she realizes I jumped outside," he said with panic in his voice, as he ushered the small family into his home, before swiftly shutting the door behind them, and locking it. When All Might saw the looks of his new flatmates, he took a deep calming breath, put back on his fearless smile before talking again. "I believe we should all introduce ourselves. You can call me Toshinori," All Might exclaimed, as he energetically pointed at himself with his thumb. What a quick recovery went through Inko's head. She quickly washed the bewilderment off her face, and with a slight blush answered, "My name is Inko Midoriya, but please call me Inko, everyone does." Toshinori made eye contact with the young woman for a second, and nearly got lost in her pretty green eyes before giving her a slight nod. Both of them then looked at Izuku, who was suddenly once again extremely nervous, holding the hem of his t-shirt for dear life, shaking, and looking at the carpet, as if it should come alive, and swallow him whole at any second. All Might saw the young child's embarrassment, and he knew that he had to listen to the playful part of his mind, and have some fun. "Don't worry, I already know your name, Ishimaku." Izuku twitched a bit, and quickly looked up. "And no, my name is Izuku. I am sorry it's so hard to hear you from down there in my old age. Please could you repeat that, Rizmoku?" The tall hero responded, and got on one knee, and put his hand next to his ear in a playful fashion. "My name is Izuku," the green-haired boy said louder right into the hero's ear, and Toshinori comically fell on his back clutching both of his ears. "Oh my goodness! I think I have gone deaf. What tragedy to befall a hero! My career is most certainly over. I will have to star in commercials dressed as a giant dancing burger. Oh no, he shouted in an exaggerated sad voice, rolling around on the ground to Izuku's horror. The woman couldn't help herself, but quietly chuckled at such a sight. After everything calmed down, and the hero magically regained his hearing, he showed the family around the penthouse. It was just perfect, glistening hardwood flooring, many pretty carpets, and enough room for 8 people. There were 4 bathrooms in total, a large kitchen with the latest cooking utensils, a large living room, 3 guest rooms, a balcony, and even an indoor sauna. But that was just one side of the situation. The entire place seemed so lifeless and empty. It was as if no one lived here, not that there was dust and cobwebs or anything like that. It just didn't have that homey feel, at least to Inko. Ms. Midoriya, you look worried. Is there anything wrong? Toshinori asked when he noticed her expression. She immediately smiled up at him. No, it's just, do you live here alone? Well, you see, life is a strong word. I mostly just sleep here, justicing, and villains don't really have a regular schedule, All Might said, as he nervously rubbed his head. Inko felt a bit sorry for the older man. It's not that he wasn't doing well for himself, he clearly was, but she couldn't imagine living such a lonely life. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard Izuku from the other room. Mommy, come look at this. Both she and the hero rushed to see what was going on, only to find Izuku on the floor in pure ecstasy in a room, which Toshinori only described as a storage area without even going in. Oh no, he found it. There was All Might memorabilia everywhere, from rolled-up posters, masks, and life-size copies of the hero made from paper to more obscure things like shampoos with All Might's head as a dispenser, and a whole box of candy bars called Mighties. Izuku was sitting on the carpet with boxes of small figurines all around him with little stars in his eyes. Oh, I am so sorry, this collection must be worth a fortune, the green-haired woman said, as she gently picked up her son under the shoulders from the mess he made. No, it's fine, my sponsors always send this stuff to me every time I do a promotion. I would throw it out if I could, but then people would start going through the garbage again, he admitted with a defeated expression on his face. So why don't you try donating it? I would, but then I would just become a giant walking commercial for myself, he exclaimed with desperation, nearly chasing off his smile. In that moment he remembered just how excited and nervous he was when he was making his first commercial for a small clothing brand, which ended in everyone wearing a yellow t-shirt with Plus Ultra written on them, which made him feel like a cult leader every time he stepped outside. Can I take them? Izuku said unsurely. Toshinori looked at the small boy, which made the boy a bit nervous again. I mean, not all of them, just some for the room. I will return them afterwards, I promise, he said quietly, and pointed at the door to the room he was staying in. So pure. Why not? You know what they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure, the hero energetically responded. He was about to continue his tour, but was suddenly interrupted with his own voice. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. All Might quickly fished the phone out of his pants and brought it to his ear. I'll be right there, he said after the voice from the other end stopped. His attention returned back to the family. I am afraid that's all the time we have. Some villain with control over asphalt is terrorizing a nearby road construction. The fridge is quite full, and I am sure you can finish the exploration on your own. Good luck, he yelled, as hastily entered his bedroom, and came out a second later fully dressed in his attire, before jumping from the balcony into the loud city below. Izuku quickly ran to the balcony to watch the hero flying through the air, and gave him an energetic wave. Hey Izuku, do you want any help decorating your room? Inko asked after the child's frantic movement stopped. They spent the rest of the day decorating, had a late lunch, and after that dinner. At first they both wanted to wait for their new roommate, but after a while the boy's stomach started rumbling from hunger. At 2 a.m., Toshinori softly landed on the balcony, happy he managed to keep the family from waking up, though he was also pretty angry. He had lost more than a half of the day chasing after that villain, and doing an ungodly amount of paperwork. How did I get it done so fast anyway? He often relied on takeout, but since most shops were already closed he knew he would have to put his acceptable cooking skills to a test. I just hope it doesn't catch fire again, his stomach angrily growled, as he entered the kitchen only for a heavenly smell to tickle his nose. There were 2 pots wrapped in dry blue dishcloth with a note attached to it. He snatched it, and began reading. All Might, I can't ever express how very grateful we both are for your help. We tried waiting for you, but we both got pretty hungry, and had dinner, but I cooked a bit more in case you got hungry, and got here late. Please help yourself. Inko, he uncovered both pots, one half full of rice, the other half full of curry, and some steam hit him in the face. How is it still warm? That woman is magical. He pulled out a plate, and took a serving, then second, and then finished both pots. It was just so good. It had the exactly right amounts of salt, and other spices, weight be damned. After eating, the chair he was sitting on quickly became the most comfortable place in the world, and so he fell asleep. At 3 a.m., Izuku's bladder woke the sleeping boy up, and he stumbled into the hallway in search of the toilet, and after relieving himself he made a mistake when walking back to bed, and ended up inside the hero's personal training room. The walls of the room were reinforced by strong metal. There were 5 punching bags of various sizes, a giant treadmill, an exercise bike, and a humongous weight rack. This is where he trains. The green-haired boy was mesmerized by everything he looked at, as he wandered through the room. Every dent, and every scratch, they were all products of the hero's rigorous training. He became so enthralled by his environment that he didn't notice a jump rope lying on the floor, which made him trip. He made a few quick steps to stabilize himself until he ran into something soft he immediately grabbed. He couldn't believe his eyes. There were not 5 punching bags, there were 6. This one was just so big he just saw it, as a part of a wall. It was a huge 4 feet wide, and 8 feet tall object made from black artificial leather, and held up by a massive metal chain. I bet he uses it to practice smashes, Izuku said in excitement. It must be so amazing to throw a smash. The boy looked at his hands, and then at the bag. No, I can't do that, but he wouldn't mind if I tried, would he? The small boy looked around the room to make sure no one was watching, and then took his fighting stance. Smash, he whispered, and attempted a punch only for his leg to slip, and him to fall right on his butt. He blushed a little, hoping there were no secret cameras in the room. As he got back up on his feet, he prepared again, and launched another punch with his whole body weight, and this time he even made contact before the recoil from the bag forced him back down on his butt. He stood up again, but this time with a small smile. For his third try he imagined the meanest-looking villain in the place of the bag. He had 8 red eyes, 7 arms with claws sharp as knives, 4 legs, purple skin, and razor-sharp teeth. He took his this time improved stance, where his legs weren't so twisted around each other, held out his arm, and took a running start. Smash! He shouted, as his tiny fist made contact again, and this time the villain punching bag actually moved. It in fact moved so much that it made contact with the ceiling with enough force to dislodge it from its hook, and fell on the metal ground with a loud crash, which woke up everyone in the penthouse. Izuku heard a knock on his door, which immediately grabbed his attention before the door opened, and the giant hero entered his new room. All Might stopped for a moment to take in his surroundings. From every side there have been smaller versions of himself staring at him, which was more than unnerving. "Hello there, young man. How did the hospital treat you?" he asked, ignoring the rest of the room, and concentrating on its sole occupant. "The doctor was very nice. He even gave me a lollipop," Izuku said happily, and a wide smile appeared on his face. All Might's smile however wavered, as he sat down on the ground to better face the boy, and the green-haired child noticed this immediately. "Are you mad that I broke your bag?" Izuku asked, and lowered his head, which caught Toshinori completely by surprise, and he quickly patted the boy's head reassuringly. "No, it's okay, it was easy to put it back," he answered honestly, which calmed the boy a lot. "But we need to talk about your quirk, young Midoriya." "My quirk?" "Yes, young man, it seems that you now have the same power as me cursing through you," All Might said, as he gently poked Izuku's tiny chest with his index finger before his face turned very serious in a second. "Listen, Izuku, I need you to promise me something." "Promise to All Might?" "I need you to promise me that you will never abuse this power to harm others, that you will only use it to help, and save those smaller and weaker. Can you do that for me?" All Might said before offering his hand to the boy. At that moment the young boy's mind went into overdrive. Even at 4 years of age he already knew that this was the moment that would determine the rest of his life. Tiny tears appeared in his eyes, as he stood up, and gave a few of Toshinori's fingers a firm squeeze in affirmation. "Yes, I will be a hero just like you, and I will save everyone. I promise." With that All Might's expression softened, and a mischievous smile returned to his face, as he quickly moved his hand into Izuku's armpit, and started tickling him furiously. "I wish you the best of luck, young Midoriya." -5 p.m. at the meeting of Hero Public Safety Commission members, and that concludes this month's financial report. Finished. The always extremely tired beige-haired Yakumaru, and everyone else in the conference room sighed in relief, and about half of the event started to rise from their seats only to be abruptly stopped by the president. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know that every one of you can't wait to get back home, but before we all go to our families there is still one thing we need to discuss," she said calmly, and nodded to someone behind her, and the projector was turned back on showing a picture of a green-haired boy. This is Izuku Midoriya, a 4-year-old boy, who was recently rescued by the #1 hero All Might. There was some murmuring among the other members which immediately stopped when the president gave them an irritated look. Since the child's name and photo was leaked into the press, the boy and his mother were placed under protection, but today All Might, with whom the family is currently staying, notified the commission about a small incident which took place during early morning hours of today. The child was apparently able to muster enough power to rival even some of the hero's strongest attacks. A 4-year-old, as strong as All Might. This can't be real. To say that everyone in the room was shocked would be an understatement. They kept frantically looking at people sitting next to them. But if anything was clearly evident to them, it was fear. Most of the accidents involving quirks didn't involve professional heroes or villains. Both groups were almost always trying to end every conflict as quickly and cleanly as possible. Instead, these accidents were mostly caused by young children who had just discovered their quirks. These cases ranged from things not too serious like shoplifting and minor property damage to deadly ones like blackouts, arson, and sometimes even deaths. Workers of this commission were no strangers to this, yet they couldn't even imagine the complete chaos and destruction that could ensue from a child with the power to demolish an entire city block with a single movement of his hand. He was taken earlier today to get his quirk analyzed, and Dr. Fujiwara is here to share the results. An elderly man with a square gray haircut and deep wrinkles took the stage with a piece of paper. What came next was a 10-minute lecture of how exactly Izuku's quirk functions, which only made the entire room more nervous. When the elderly scientist stopped talking, there was once again energetic murmuring between the members. Everyone, please calm down. This situation will be handled accordingly, but for the time being all we can do is to observe. Observe? Have you gone mad? Yelled a bearded man from the back of the room. What if the boy absorbs more dangerous quirks? There is no way a child could ever be trusted with that power, shouted another one of the listeners, as she jumped from her seat. Those angry and panic-filled voices were immediately stopped when the president slapped her hand on her desk, which once again got the attention of everyone. We have already taken some safety precautions, but the boy will be constantly observed either by our agents or by the number 1 hero, which should minimize the possibility of any dangerous situation. -7 hours later at the penthouse balcony, Izuku put down the phone he borrowed from his mother's handbag against the windowsill, and pointed the camera at himself. The jumpsuit, which he was wearing right now, was weird. It was hand-delivered earlier just a few hours ago to his new home along with a pair of gloves by 2 men, who both looked like secret agents. But both his mother and Toshinori implored him to wear this new suit whenever he went outside under his normal clothes. Even though it was skin-tight, it didn't feel at all uncomfortable. It had been made from a very comfortable, thin green material, and it soon felt like a second skin to young Izuku. But more importantly for him, it looked like a real hero costume. He checked his appearance before pulling up a sign made of cardboard. He tore from one of the boxes containing All Might's merchandise, and painted a large blue and yellow one over with his crayons. This is a quirk test number 1. He whispered excitedly, and then put the sign down. Luckily for him, All Might left just 2 hours ago, and his mother was fast asleep in her room. He would have asked for permission to practice using his quirk, but after what happened earlier today he wasn't sure if it was safe for his mother. Earlier that day, "Hey Mom, look what I can do," Izuku said, as many bones suddenly burst out of the skin on his arm, creating an ominous jagged spear, and then reverted back to normal. "Ta-da!" he exclaimed happily. "That's a very nice Izuku," she said slowly with wide eyes before promptly fainting. "Mom, no!" Izuku yelled in horror while jumping towards her, and bracing her before she could hit the floor. Her weight was too much for the boy though, and so they both crashed down with her son pinned under her belly. When All Might saw this, he quickly hurried over, and picked up Inko, which allowed the boy to crawl away. "What happened? Are you okay?" asked All Might with worry in his voice while carefully putting down the mother on a nearby sofa. "I don't know, I just showed her my quirk," Izuku responded unsurely. He outstretched his arm, and gave the number 1 hero the same demonstration. "So disturbing, back and present. Okay, so first up, sharp boner," he said, as his arm transformed into a bone blade. Izuku let out a happy giggle, as the sharp bone made the tiniest reflection of moonlight. "Wow, it's so cool!" He silently gushed over it with little sparks in his eyes while gently and slowly waving it through the air, and adding whoosh sounds with his mouth. After a while he walked away from the camera's watchful eye, and came back a moment later with a plain piece of paper, and attempted to perform the sharpness test he once saw in a TV commercial. But before he could, the paper was taken from him by a random gust of wind, and drifted down to the streets below. Similar mostly unsuccessful tests continued for a while until he got tired, and returned his arm back to its normal form. He began to sneak his way back to bed when he thought about what All Might was doing right now with envy. Probably catching criminals, saving civilians, or maybe just flying. Then a sudden realization struck him. "Does it mean that I can fly now too?" He ditched his bedtime for a while, and turned the camera back on. He always does this weird squat thingy whenever in the air. The young boy tried to copy the hero squat, as he coined it, but quickly lost his balance, and fell on his back. Maybe he does it when he's already flying. He got back on his feet, and tried to copy an old flying pose he saw some weird cleft-chinned American hero do a while back, but nothing happened. Oh, I know, I must already be in the air. And with this idea Izuku started jumping around like a broken mechanical frog, but still ended without results. Yet his determination wouldn't let the boy just fail, so he took a running start, flexed every muscle in his tiny body, and the next thing he felt was intense wind pressure ruffling his face. At the Todoroki abode, Shoto Todoroki was sitting in the garden alone looking at the fish in the koi pond slowly swimming in circles. Ever since he had his bandages removed, the boy with heterochromia had trouble falling asleep. The nightmares which came after the whole kettle incident never really stopped. He could still see his mother with a scary look in her eyes only to be blinded by indescribable pain. He slowly and carefully brought his right hand to his new scar, and let his quirk slowly cool his mostly healed, but still sensitive wound. Right now, he had no one to talk to. His mom was probably the only pillar of support he ever had. Even though he liked his siblings very much, his father never let him get very close to them, or even play with them. Then there was the man himself, and he would have a better chance if he tried talking to a rock. Shoto cautiously waved his hand through the air creating small soft snowflakes, and watched them drift in the wind. Mom, I hope that whenever you are okay. This moment of peace was however immediately interrupted by a shower of sand, when something, which could only be described as green thunder, landed in the sandpit. The boy immediately jumped from the bench he was sitting on, and dove for cover. What is this? A villain attack? His panic thoughts were broken up when a voice came from the sandpit. Am I alive? I am alive, Izuku said with relief while stepping out of the sand. Todoroki peeked from behind the bench he hid behind only to see a smaller boy in a green jumpsuit dusting himself off. Wow, this suit is really something, it doesn't have a scratch on it. Are you okay? Asked shyly. Todoroki approached the younger boy. The green-haired boy looked at the unknown person, and immediately tears rushed into his eyes. Oh, I'm so sorry about your face, I promise I will fix it. As soon as I get a hold of my quirk, I really didn't mean to hurt you. It was an accident. Izuku quickly mumbled an apology which caught the other boy completely off guard. It's fine, it's not your fault, but your hair's full of blood. That's my normal hair color. Todoroki deadpanned while pointing at his hair, and watched, as the face of sadness quickly transformed into one of excitement. Wait, you have two colors? That's so awesome. It is? Yeah. Are other parts of you also two-colored, like your teeth or your toenails? No, just my hair and my eyes. Your eyes? Oh wait, you are right. How did I not notice that? That's so cool. Even though Shoto was feeling sad, angry, and cluelessly lost just a moment ago, Izuku's enthusiasm and positivity were so incredibly potent and infectious it brought a small smile back on the scarred boy's face. And so the two boys talked about anything that came to mind, and Izuku's interest only skyrocketed when Shoto agreed to show him his own quirk by creating 2 ice popsicles from twigs lying on the ground around the nearby tree which were quickly abandoned due to their horrid taste. How did you end up here anyway? Asked Todoroki suddenly, which quickly flipped the boy's smile upside down. Oh no, I have to get back home quickly before he returns. He couldn't even imagine the chaos that would follow if All Might came back home, and didn't find him there. He took a quick look, and found a few skyscrapers in the distance. I am so sorry, but I have to go. Let's talk later, said Izuku, and quickly bowed in apology before he prepared to jump again. Wait, what's your name? Todoroki asked abruptly, scared of losing a new friend. It's Izuku, he said quickly, and jumped with all his strength into the night sky. The wind whipped his entire body, as he flew towards the large building, and very soon he realized the fact that he completely overshot his target. He wanted to scream, but it was nearly impossible to even breathe, and so he was reduced to watching in terror, as the ground got slowly closer. Then a massive object collided with him, snatching him from the air before they both landed on the roof of a supermarket. You are under arrest for resisting arrest, and other charges, exclaimed Toshinori sternly before taking another leap towards the skyscraper with Izuku safe in his arms. Later in the living room. So, what exactly were you thinking, young man? All Might asked seriously. Right after they returned, All Might sat the boy down on an armchair, and began questioning him. Luckily the green-haired boy was uninjured, and Inko was still asleep when they returned. He couldn't even imagine how the mother would react if she learned about what happened. I am sorry, I just wanted to be like you. If I want to become a hero like you I have to train super hard, right? And so I thought I would start early was all he managed to say before sobbing, and heavy tears overtook him. And honestly Toshinori didn't know how to react. 6 months. He said suddenly, and Izuku turned his red, swollen eyes towards him. It took me 6 months to master that jump. During that time I hardly slept, and felt as if anything I did wasn't enough. Look, you don't need to rush anything, just keep your target in your sight, and I am sure you will reach it. All Might took a knee in front of the little boy, as he finished, and then pulled out a handkerchief, and smothered the boy's face with it, wiping away all of his tears. You don't need to copy me, just be who you want to be, and I promise that I will help you, the big man said, and smiled at the young boy, who just stared at him in awe. I will try to, All Might. I was worried, but now I see that I couldn't ask for a better person to inherit this power. Now go back to bed, you have kindergarten tomorrow, right? And soon the boy slept soundly with a small smile of relief back on his face. Izuku's shyness was pushed into an overdrive after he discovered that the kindergarten he would be brought to was not the one he usually visited, but an entirely new one. It calmed him a bit when his mother told him that this was only a temporary change, until things got back to normal. But it was still hard for him to imagine that he wouldn't see his friends, but instead some new people he has never seen before. Izuku's mother wasn't very pleased about the fact either, but after a talk with All Might, and a short phone call with the friendly detective, she understood that it was just a temporary safety measure both for her son, and for the other children. He would be moved into the daycare service established by the Safety Commission for Young Children, or other relatives of well-known heroes to ensure their well-being and protection. It was much larger than the green-haired boy expected, and there weren't just toys and jumping ropes like in the old one. Here they had a trampoline, 2 ball pits, and even a small slide. Oh, you must be a new resident of ours, said a young lady, as she walked towards Izuku, and gave him a pat on the head. I am Michiko, and what do I call you? She asked enthusiastically, and looked at the boy with a soft smile. Izuku, ma'am. Oh, what a fine young gentleman. Well, Izuku, if you need anything just come, and ask Naoko to stop that right now, she exclaimed suddenly, and ran off to 2 boys wrestling on the carpet nearby to break up the fight. He felt like a celebrity since he and his mom had been escorted there in a police car, but things soon turned sour when he noticed that all the kids were already in groups playing wide variety of games, and the shy little green-haired boy didn't have an idea how he should approach them, and ask if he could join them. Tag players just rushed past him before he even managed to get a word out. Children in ball pits simply dug themselves deeper as soon as he approached them like earthworms, and the kids playing with blocks built a huge tower with their quirks, and didn't even notice him. Come on, Tenya, don't you want to go play with others? He heard nearby, and turned his attention towards another caretaker currently arguing with a slightly taller boy with glasses. I am doing research. I can't right now, Miss Takara, he exclaimed, and wildly gestured with his hands towards the pile of papers on the table before him. It was as if a tiny robot went rogue, and then caught an error in processing, which prompted Izuku to take a closer look. Just as he came near the taller boy, young Tenya suddenly jumped from his seat, and thrust his arm, nearly hitting the green-haired child in the process. Oh, you must be new here. I am Tenya Ida, said the spectacled kid energetically without changing his serious expression even a little. Izuku slowly accepted the hand, and gently shook it, and introduced himself again. After the quick social interaction, the boy immediately turned around, grabbed a small light blue scope with stars and planets painted on it, and looked through a window behind himself. Izuku took a step forward, and looked through the window himself, but didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. There was just a small park outside, and a few dark clouds outside, but the taller boy seemed completely focused on what was happening outside. What are you watching, Tenya? But the green-haired boy didn't get an answer. Ida just turned back around, and quickly drew a tree with something small and roundish hanging off it on a piece of paper before putting it neatly on an organized stack of papers all displaying the similar picture. He made sure the papers didn't stick out at all before turning his attention back on the green-haired kid. Can you keep a secret? He asked with an incredibly serious expression after he took a quick look around the room to make sure no one was listening. Izuku hesitated for a few seconds before nodding repeatedly. I am trying to uncover the most important secret in the world, Ida said excitedly with an incredibly serious face, and his arms gesticulating furiously. What is the secret? Izuku asked after holding his breath for a few moments without even realizing it. That secret is, where do babies come from? What do you mean? Izuku was confused, and this idea didn't ever even cross his mind. Think about it. My mom always tells me, and my brother, that we were cute babies. I can't even remember being a baby, let alone anything before that, can you? The blue-haired boy asked, and the shorter boy couldn't help but agreed. There was no way anyone could ever hope to remember something like that. But what are you looking at? The taller boy quickly handed him the small toy scope, and pointed at one of the large trees outside. Izuku tried to observe the tree, but it was just a regular plant. I don't get it. No, not the tree, the beehive on the tree. Izuku looked again, and this time he saw it. There was a little natural apiary hanging from one of the branches. Oh yeah, you are right, that's so cool. But what does it have to do with babies? Small Ida readjusted his glasses before looking at the shorter child with determination of a seasoned conspiracy theorist. Everything. When I asked my mom, she said that it was a secret, and then I overheard both of my parents talking about me. And what did they say? Little Izuku asked, as he quickly gained more and more interest. That I shouldn't know about the birds and the bees. Are they working together? With that, Ida put on a smug smile and pulled a paper seemingly at random from the small stack. Here's what I think. The beehive isn't actually the home of the bees, but a human egg, Tenya exclaimed, and pointed at the drawing, which showed a small figure cramped into the small space. Whoa! And then, when the baby gets big enough, the hive falls down, breaks, and a bird takes the baby to the new family. That's so cool. But why do girls get so big when they are waiting for the baby? Suddenly Ida's eyes went wide open in shock. Oh no, another hole in my theory, he exclaimed, as he picked up the pile, and swiftly threw it into a nearby trash bin. Soon his shocked expression changed into a defeated one. When he saw the older boy's disappointment, Izuku began panicking. I am sorry, it's okay, I just thought I finally had it. Maybe I could help you. But before he had time to finish, Tenya tightly grasped his shoulders. Really? You would do that for me? Ida asked, as if his energy magically recharged in an instant. Sure, but what do we do? We have to get more clues from someone trustworthy. But they can't be from a parent. And so the boys started planning the next step on their journey for enlightenment, and after that started playing. 5 hours later, the small green-haired boy entered his new home with his mother after she picked him up at the daycare. So, what would you like for lunch today, Izuku? Fried chicken, he exclaimed, and raised both of his hands triumphantly. Okay, but you have to eat your greens, she said warmly, and petted his head. And with that, Inko started preparing food in the kitchen while the boy sat down on the carpet in the living room and turned on the television just as one of his favorite cartoons started. After a while, the chicken was calmly sizzling on the stove, and Inko joined her son, and just watched him get excited about the silly story on the screen. The sun slowly disappeared behind dark clouds, and soft rain was soon softly drumming on the windows, filling the apartment with a calm atmosphere, and the heavenly smell flowed from the kitchen. Just as the mother got up from the couch to boil some potatoes, the glass door to the balcony opened, and Toshinori quickly rushed inside. Guess who has the rest of the day off? He exclaimed. Wow, heroes have vacations? Izuku asked. Oh, not really, but when the weather gets bad, it interferes with most quirks, so most of the villains stay home. All Might informed them with a beaming smile, and made his way into the bathroom to get a nice warm shower, as the weather began to worsen once again. While he showered, and put on some clean civilian clothes, Inko prepared the table, and another plate for the hero, and after 10 minutes all residents met around the dining table. There was little to no conversation, they were all just quietly enjoying their meal in peace. Toshinori repeatedly tried to thank the green-haired woman for the food, but she just brushed it off by telling him just how grateful she was that he had let them stay. After they finished, Inko's phone rang, and the large hero immediately volunteered to take care of the dishes, which left him alone with Izuku in the kitchen, and the young boy quickly grasped the opportunity. Mr. All Might, can you help me with something? He asked nervously, failing to meet the blond man's eyes. Toshinori looked at the boy with a bright smile, with his hands still concentrated on the dirty plate. Anything you need, young man, he said cheerfully. I need to ask you something. All Might's smile faltered a bit, but he kept scrubbing. Well, then ask away. Please don't ask about my quirk. I can't trust the child with that information. Where do babies come from? And just like that, Toshinori's hand involuntarily twitched from the shock, and sent the plate soaring straight through the window. Oh, well, another thing to replace. What was that question? Where do babies come from? Oh no, I heard him right. Even though the tall man kept a calm smile, his inner voice was suddenly sounding like teenage girls screeching while watching a rather gruesome horror movie. Why would you ask me that? Because we need to understand the secret of the birds and the bees. Birds and the bees, but wait, who is we? My new friend wants to know. Izuku quickly answered, and continued to expectantly stare at the hero who was starting to sweat. All Might was frantically thinking about an escape from this situation. Should he jump out of the window in search of the discarded plate? Should he fake a phone call? Yet after a look at the boy, he knew that no matter what he did, Izuku would simply ask again later. And so he pulled his hands out of the kitchen sink, wiped them on his pants, and focused his attention completely on the boy. Listen, young man, this isn't something you should discuss with me. Why don't you ask your dad? The little boy looked down for a moment, and sadness flashed over his face, and the tall man immediately regretted his question. I've never met my dad. He moved from Japan when I was super small, and I don't even remember how he looks," he said sadly while averting his eyes from his favorite hero. "Well then, why don't you ask your mother?" "No. If I ask her it won't be a secret anymore." Toshinori sighed, and rubbed his forehead when an idea struck him. "Okay, I will tell you later today, okay?" "Really? Thank you so much," Izuku said, as he embraced one of his legs before running off. At evening, Inko tucked her son in bed, and soon after she left, then just a few minutes later All Might slipped in with a very thick, old-looking book without her noticing. "Are you ready to learn the secret, young man?" "Yeah," the small green-haired boy answered excitedly. And just like that, Toshinori pulled up a chair next to the boy's bed, and opened his book. It was a very old biology textbook from his days at the high school, which meant that there were no pictures, and everything was written in long, boring paragraphs. "Human reproduction is achieved through sexual intercourse." "Sensual what?" Izuku interrupted, already confused. All Might's smile just widened, as he flipped a few pages forward, and started reading again. "Sexual intercourse or copulation is a reproductive act in which the male reproductive organ." What is an organ? So far Izuku couldn't understand a single thing, and these new words didn't help at all. But All Might just kept his smile, and flipped what looked like at least 100 pages back, slowly, and checking twice if he was going to the correct page. Organs are the body's recognizable structures. And so this little talk continued, and the boy's eyes started getting more and more tired, his eyelids heavier and heavier, as All Might spoke, and spoke ever so slowly, until the boy finally fell asleep, at which point the hero carefully closed his book, and silently exited the room. It didn't solve the problem completely, but it gave him or to anybody else, who would have to explain it to the boy, at least 2 years of time, since he knew that a 4-year-old boy wouldn't ask about something so boring anytime soon. "I hope you keep that innocence for as long as possible, young man." Feeling a bit thirsty from all that reading, he made his way into the kitchen only to see Inko brewing herself some tea. "Do you have enough hot water for one more cup, Miss Midoriya?" the tall man asked happily, as he sat down at the table. "Of course, you can call me Inko. Only if you call me Toshinori." He reminded her playfully. After a minute she also took a seat, and the two started chatting a bit. It was a nice change for the hero to have someone he could talk to. It was a pleasant feeling which he lost when his training ended, and the mother seemed very interested in the hero, mainly by his ability to always remain cheerful. This conversation quickly changed though when All Might suddenly changed the subject. "So where is Izuku's father anyway?" he asked, only to see her kind smile turn into a sad one. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "No, it's nothing. My ex-husband left us before Izuku was even born, said that he wasn't ready to be someone's father, and then moved abroad." "Did you get a divorce?" "Yes, but he still sends us money, and he even used to call and check on us, but not anymore." "I am sorry to hear that. It must be very hard to look after Izuku on your own," said the large hero, but Inko immediately cheered up. "Not at all actually, he has always been such a good boy. Please give me a moment." She quickly stood up, and swiftly walked to her room only to return just a few seconds later with a photo album which she laid on the table, nearly spilling her tea in the process. They spent nearly half an hour looking at old pictures of Izuku and other children while Inko described the situations during which they were taken. Then he saw what had to be the sweetest thing he had ever seen in his entire life. In this picture Izuku was sleeping in his All Might onesie, clutching a plushy version of the number 1 hero close to his chest whilst covered in a blanket. He couldn't quite understand what, but something made his heart feel just a little more comfortable in its place when he looked at the picture. "I gave him that onesie on his 3rd birthday, and he absolutely refused to take it off for 2 days. He even started crying when was supposed to take a bath." "And what did you do?" Inko giggled before giving him an answer. "Well, I told him that only villains wear smelly clothes, and he nearly tore it in half trying to take it off." To which Toshinori burst out laughing heartily. They spent a few more minutes telling each other funny stories like this until they reached the end of the photo album, and Inko put it back in her room. But after a while both of them finished their tea, and went their separate ways. Yet Toshinori couldn't get something out of his mind. Every time he made Inko smile with some dumb villain story, he just wanted to tell her another, just so he could watch her smile for a bit longer. It was a weird urge, but not an unpleasant one. A week has gone by, and everything just slowly shifted into a routine. Every day Izuku woke up, brushed his teeth, ate breakfast, and was taken to the daycare by a police car. Even his new weird suit and gloves became pretty much normal. Ever since he met him, Izuku's impression of Ida changed from malfunctioning robot into friendly robot, and after he managed to persuade him about the fact that this whole baby business contained mostly boredom and long, difficult words, the two actually started having a pretty good time together. One day they would construct an extremely impressive structure from building blocks, and the next they would play a game of hide and seek so complicated it perplexed even their supervisors, which only led to further delight for the boys. In a slightly different way, friendship also slowly grew between Toshinori and Inko. Both soon noticed that whenever alone, they always had something interesting to talk about, and overall, just enjoyed the company of each other. All Might sometimes found his head invaded by thoughts about the nice green-haired woman, just like the one right now. Does she like flowers? Would that be weird? Currently the number 1 hero was patrolling a busy street from a rooftop when he noticed a flower shop on the other side. What he failed to notice though was a villain who snuck silently behind him, whilst holding a rather well-worn crowbar. He took a wide swing, and hit All Might's shoulder with all of his power, and this action produced a rather nasty-sounding crunch. The tall man turned around, and saw the guy in a ridiculous-looking red costume with a green skull badly painted on his chest, who just attacked him on the ground holding his clearly dislocated wrist screeching in pain like a mad person. Sometimes you people just make it too easy, Toshinori said, as he picked up the injured criminal by the collar, quickly determining from the villain's eyes that he was under the influence of something. He carefully jumped from the roof, and called over a policeman who quickly arrested the wanted felon. After that people quickly surrounded the hero. He was just writing an autograph for a couple of kids when his hand froze, his mind once again invaded by a thought, when his eyes met a small bakery just a few buildings away. Maybe something sweet would be better. Inko was meanwhile being pestered with questions by her friends about 20 blocks away in a small cafe. She at first wanted to refuse their invitation thinking that it would make it harder for police to protect her family, but Toshinori managed to convince her to meet her friends even though this required 2 officers dressed in civilian clothing observing the whole group from a nearby table. So did you see him naked? Asked her bespectacled short purple-haired friend from work suddenly, which instantly made Inko choke on her coffee, and then gasp for air. Takara, stop it! Ordered the other friend to throw an angry look her way. Come on Kichi, they live together, and accidents happen, Takara said unapologetically, which made Inko blush even harder. No, it's nothing like that, the green-haired woman forced out rather quickly. Come on Inko, I work at HR, and I can spot a liar from 100 yards away. Did anything happen? Takara asked again, not even bothering to hide her excitement. Well, the young mother started with scarlet still on her cheeks. 3 days ago, she woke up with her book on her stomach after a short nap. The green-haired woman stood up, stretched and decided to go for a shower. It was so nice to have everyday access to nearly endless supply of hot water that was always available. She chose the closest bathroom, and opened the door only to see Toshinori in his fluffy pink bathrobe, and a matching shower cap brushing his teeth next to the mirror with a happy smile still present on his face. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but due to the massive size of his body, and his musculature, the bathrobe was just a few sizes too short, leaving his limbs mostly uncovered. Inko let out an involuntary squeak, and after blurting out "I'm sorry," swiftly closed the door, while All Might just shrugged, and continued his brushing. In the present, so close, and yet so far, muttered the short woman in glasses. How do you still work in HR, you little perv? Kichi remarked. And so, her 2 friends began to bicker like they always used to, which gave Inko a feeling of normalcy, and that was something she hasn't felt for a whole week. Meanwhile her son was playing a new game with his friend when they were suddenly approached by a new face in the daycare. It was only her 2nd day here, and on the first one, she just felt too shy to talk to anybody, especially since she never had any friends at all. At that time this little girl only knew 5 people, and none of them were children. But today was different. Just a minute ago she saw the taller of the 2 boys standing on one leg with his arms in a weird position next to his head, and so the shy girl, fueled by curiosity, walked a bit closer to observe them. A tree? Guessed the green-haired boy again, only to be met by silence. They were playing charades for a while, but now it seemed like Ida had finally won. Izuku has already tried to guess a fork, a tree, an antenna, and a lamp. Now he had only one guess left, before Ida could declare his ultimate victory. Maybe I'm just looking at him wrong, Izuku thought, and took a few quick steps back only to bump into someone with his shoulder. Sorry. Are you okay? He quickly said, as he turned around, and saw a girl slightly taller than him, who had the look of a deer caught in the headlights. I'm okay. What are you doing? She forced out while dodging eye contact. We are playing charades. Wanna join? Join? She quickly averted her eyes to the ground, as a slight blush flashed across her cheeks. Sure. Awesome. Come on, the boy said excitedly, and grasped her hand, and led her closer to his friend. The black-haired girl was surprised by his gloves, but didn't ask about them due to her shy nature. What do you think? About what? We need to guess what Tenya is. Haven't you ever played this game? Izuku asked with visible confusion, but the taller girl just shook her head. The green-haired boy then tried to explain the basic rules of the game to her. Luckily, she grasped the concept quickly. Ida was meanwhile utterly determined to win this match, and so he stood completely still, despite the cramp he felt in his leg, to avoid giving his opponents any hints. The victory is so close I can taste it. A candle holder? The girl suddenly blurted out, crushing his dream of victory. The tall boy lowered his head in defeat, and took a step forward to shake hands with the victor, only to realize that his other leg fell asleep. His knee gave up on him, he lost his balance, and fell straight on his face. The shorter boy had to suppress a chuckle, as he helped his friend back on his feet. After a quick congratulation to the girl, it was Izuku's turn to pretend. He decided to make it easier for the new player. The green-haired boy spread his legs a little, put his hands on his hip, straightened his back, and flashed a toothy smile, perfectly mimicking his favorite hero. Ida immediately knew what he was doing, and chose to let her have the first guess, which was a decision he would soon regret. Momo looked for a while at the shorter boy, unsure and confused, but before long her eyes flashed, she smiled in recognition, and exclaimed her answer. Broccoli. As soon as Izuku heard her utter that word, his smile dropped. That was so mean, he said sadly. Such savagery, commented Tenya in support. He couldn't believe that someone could compare his new friend to such a disgusting vegetable. But after he took a look at the shorter boy, he saw a resemblance, which he now couldn't unsee. I'm sorry, the girl said, when she noticed the effect of her words. She didn't actually know how she managed to offend him, but after being nice to her, it just felt wrong to hurt him in any way, and she knew that she somehow did just that. You weren't making fun of me? Izuku asked, surprised, as sadness vanished. No, it's just your hair looks like broccoli? The green-haired boy finished for her. Yeah, but don't worry, that's not a bad thing. Mom says that broccoli is super healthy, and everything. Thanks, I guess. But that isn't what I was trying to do. Then what? All Might! Ida exclaimed before anyone else had the chance, as he raised his hands in victory. What's an All Might? The girl asked sincerely, which made Izuku experience a feeling, which is reserved for missionaries, when they discover that someone has never heard about their Lord and Savior. He's the coolest hero in the universe, he said energetically, as his mood once again changed, this time into blinding excitement. Izuku then swiftly ran off before returning with a comic book and an action figure in a few seconds. The duo spent the next few hours introducing the new girl to the #1 hero, and watched her become more and more interested. They also learned her name, and she told them that her family recently moved into a giant house with an even bigger garden. Did he really save 100 people in 10 minutes? Yeah, and he caught the villain who started the fire. He sounds so nice, the girl remarked with a wide smile. She was having such a blast right now, that she didn't even notice it, when one of the caretakers walked over to them. Momo, your mommy's here to pick you up, so say goodbye to your friends, and let's go, she said with a gentle voice, and a patient smile on her face. The woman hated to pull the black-haired girl away from the two boys. She cared deeply for every single child in her daycare, and it was so nice to see that the shy girl who looked scared of her own shadow just yesterday was already talking with other children. Can I stay for a few more minutes? She asked, as her smile turned into a disappointed frown. I'm not sure, dear, your mother said that she's in a hurry. Momo sighed, and turned sadly back to the boys. Goodbye, she weakly muttered. See you next time, Momo, they both said, as she quickly left. Her mother, who was waiting outside, led the girl into an expensive car. But just as their driver put the car into gear, a smile once again made its home on the young girl's face when she saw her new friends furiously waving at her from the window of the daycare. 2 hours later, All Might entered the penthouse, carrying a shoe-sized pink box, and was immediately met by a heavenly smell of udon. Hi Toshinori, how was your day? The green-haired woman asked, as she stirred the soup in the pot. Successful. 6 criminals, and 2 villains arrested, he responded joyfully, and raised his thumb on his free hand. What's in the box? Inko inquired, as she finally noticed the package Toshinori held in his hand. The tall hero didn't respond, just set the box down on the table, and opened it, revealing 12 neatly stacked cupcakes of different bright colors. Each one resembled a beautiful flower, and every single one generated a fascinating smell of fruit and vanilla. The beauty of this entire bouquet stunned Inko, and she didn't know what to say. The look of surprise mixing with fascination, which appeared on her face, somehow made All Might feel very happy inside. Hey Izuku, come take a look. Her son quickly came into the kitchen waving at the tall hero. As he did so, and when he took a glance at the contents of the box, his eyes widened in astonishment. So pretty. Toshinori playfully ruffled the boy's hair, as he walked past him to his room, so he could get some normal clothing. Can I have one? Asked Izuku with little sparkles in his eyes, and it took all of Inko's determination to deny him the sweet treat before they had lunch. The lunch went, as usual, with All Might relentlessly complimenting the green-haired woman on the quality of the food, and her telling him again and again that it was no big deal at all, slowly becoming flustered. Yet the big man still couldn't quite get used to home-cooked meals every day. Izuku was meanwhile trying to finish his own food as soon as possible, with the image of the promised cupcake still fresh on his mind. Will it be sweet or sour? Will it taste like strawberries or raspberries? Is it filled with cream or fruit? His thoughts were however suddenly interrupted, as something wet and red landed right on his face, as a loud splat was heard in the room. Izuku looked up from his udon, which was also colored red now, only to see All Might with his head lowered, and his long blonde hair drenched in red liquid. There were also red and whitish chunks covering the entire table. Both the son and his mother looked at All Might in horror, until he suddenly shifted his head back into its natural position, and reached into his hair, pulled out a rather large pink chunk, smelled it, and then put it in his mouth. Cherry. He looked around, and saw the pink box open with one cupcake missing. The number 1 hero quickly put 2 and 2 together. It was clear that he was just attacked by a wild pastry, yet one question remained. How? Yet that question had to wait, when he saw the green-haired woman slowly slump in her chair. Luckily, he was fast enough to catch her before her head hit the floor, but the chair fell over in the process. Hey young man, can you give me a hand here? He said, and watched as the little boy quickly ran over to him trying to help, but the chair suddenly moved by itself. At first it started violently shaking, then stood back on its 4 legs, and then quickly slid towards the boy. As soon as he saw it, Izuku turned around, and started running for his life, as the beautiful wooden chair gave chase. A villain, Toshinori thought, as he carefully put Inko on a couch in the living room before joining the race himself. He caught up to them pretty quickly, fast enough to see Izuku shut the door to his room, and the chair banging on it with all its weight the next second. The hero quickly closed the distance to what he presumed was an angry object, and grabbed it by one of its legs, and tried to pull it back from the door only for it to snap off like a twig. So not a villain? He tried again, this time grabbing it by the seat, yet the mysterious power pushing the chair into the room was so great, he could hardly move the annoying piece of furniture with normal strength alone. But thankfully using one for all he succeeded, and dragged the 3-legged chair to the balcony, and with a grunt he lobbed the possibly haunted item into the air. The object nearly broke through the sound barrier, as it whizzed through the air, but then it slowly stopped, and started quickly heading back. Oh, so you want more? Fine by me. All Might's smile grew wider, as he pulled back his arm waiting for his target to close the distance between them. Smash! The chair was instantly reduced into thousands of splinters, and the clouds slowly dispersed. At least that's what it looked like. Toshinori soon noticed that a small cloud stayed up in the air, and was slowly approaching the penthouse. Before he could even react, it flew right past him at blinding speed. He watched the small swarm powerlessly, as it flew through the living room right at Izuku, who must have left his room when the commotion died down. The little boy hid his face behind his hands, and waited for pain to come, which it never did. The whole cloud of sharp wood stopped just a foot away from him, softly and calmly floating around his tiny body. Another quirk? Izuku gasped when he saw these little wooden spears passively levitating, and reached out to pick one from the air only to see it softly glide into his open hand. He stared at it in wonder before letting it go, so it could join its brothers and sisters in their quiet aerial ballet. All Might carefully, but quickly approached the green-haired boy, looking him over for any injuries only to find none. To say that the large man was relieved would be an understatement. All Might, what do I do? He asked in uncertainty, and a few insignificant drops of nervous sweat appeared on his forehead. Maybe try to calm down, it's probably just your quirk acting up. How do I do that? I'm scared. He squeaked out nervously, as the little pieces started slowly gaining speed, and rotating around his body, which forced the boy to gasp again in fear. Hey, it's gonna be okay, I am here, All Might said, as he carefully reached through the flying fragments, ignoring the sting on his arm, and placed his hand on the trembling boy's shoulder. Just breathe slowly in and out. Izuku did just that, and one after the other the pieces fell to the ground, creating a small circle-shaped even pile around the green-haired boy's feet. When the child noticed this, he fell on the ground, and began softly sobbing. When Toshinori saw this, the big man went down to his knees, and pulled the boy into a warm, and surprisingly soft embrace. After about a minute, the boy's sobbing stopped, and All Might released his gentle grip, before taking a small step back. And in this heartfelt moment a rather large chunk still present in the hero's blonde hair decided to fall, and splat on the ground. The sight was so absurd, it made Izuku start quietly giggling, and soon the muscular hero completed the scene with his hearty laugh. After they woke up Inko and explained what happened, she too was relieved to see that the number one hero was still alive and kicking, and shocked to discover how her own quirk changed inside her son. And so they cleaned up the mess, ate some more udon, and finished their meal with some truly delectable cupcakes. And even though it was a beautiful break from all the chaos of the hero life, All Might soon realized what time it was. He hastily put on his suit, said goodbye to the family, and went back on his patrol. The League of Villains hideout, 2 a.m. Nishioka Toga entered the bar, which never seemed to appear as open, with a revolver strapped to his waist. He was a minor villain who specialized in frauds, which was extremely easy for him since could change his appearance into that of any person he chose. The only downside of his ability was the inability to change his body again for approximately 1 month. He had done this so many times he completely forgot how his original face and body even looked, not that he cared much. Earlier today he was contacted by the League with a job offer, so he sat down and waited for the people he was supposed to meet while nursing a drink provided by the figure made of thick black smoke. About half an hour passed, as 2 people entered the bar. One of them was a rather short-looking fellow with a mustache dressed in a gray business suit and pants, while the other had a muscular figure in black pants and hoodie. They both took a seat next to him, and each one ordered a large glass of beer. As they began to discuss the job, he would need to change into someone with white hair and a horrible facial deformity to possess someone named Shigaraki for a few months before disappearing. He was happy with this offer, especially when he learned that his payment would be 10 million yen now, and another 20 million after he returned, though his happiness faltered when they showed him the picture of the person he would be mimicking. "How's this guy even still alive?" "That's none of your concern," said the shorter man, dismissing his question. They discussed some fine details, gave him another set of clothing, and watched as he fine-tuned his body and face. Satisfied with the result, Nishioka handed Nishioka a black suitcase filled to the brim with money. He picked it up and got ready to head out, when the shorter man stopped him. "Good luck," he said, as he offered his right hand for a handshake which the man eagerly accepted. He hadn't realized, however, when the mustached man tightly clasped his other hand from the other side, preventing Nishioka from reaching for his pistol. He had no way to defend himself when the guy in a hoodie pulled out a large knife, which he then buried between the shapeshifter's ribs. The dim lights of the city morgue had strange effects on people who weren't used to them. Many became nervous at the first sight of them, and some would even swear that they saw ghosts immediately after entering. All Might was luckily unaffected by these feelings, as he walked calmly through the building with Naomasa by his side, leading him through the maze of hallways. The detective wasn't so lucky though. Even if the place itself didn't have such an effect, the absence of the iconic smile on the hero's face sure did. After a minute of walking they reached their goal. It was a plain room with 2 doors, a glass wall, and a metal table covered with a piece of white fabric in the middle of it. It was used for identifying bodies, since it felt much friendlier and cleaner than the morgue itself, and it was only rarely used. Most of the time, all that the detectives needed to confirm the body's identity was a face photo of the deceased person. This was different though. All Might needed to be absolutely sure about if the man who was fished out of a small river earlier today was the same man who murdered his teacher and previous owner of One for All, and so he asked to see the body with his own 2 eyes after being presented with a photo. There was a man in his late 30s with long curly jet black hair waiting for them. He introduced himself as the head medical examiner who performed the autopsy, and led them over to the table. All Might waited with a serious frown on his face as the white fabric was revealed, and then he came face to face with the man he felt nothing but hatred for. "All for one. Is that really him?" Naomasa asked Tashinori firmly, though he could already tell what the answer was from the hero's look. "Yes, it's Shigaraki." He responded, yet his face remained unreadable. "What killed him, doctor?" "I found 2 stab wounds. The first caused one of his lungs to collapse," he said before showing the wounds to the detective. "And the second one went right through the aorta, killing him instantly. I also noticed some minor bruising on his right hand." "So there was a struggle?" Naomasa said, as he wrote the information into his small notepad. "It's possible, but I have not found from injuries from self-defense. Normally when someone's attacked with a knife they try to grab it, or put their hands between them and the attacker, but, as you can see, there are no cuts." It was then when both men noticed the intensity with which All Might watched the corpse. It was like he was waiting for the villain to come back from death and attack them in a second. "All Might, are you okay?" the detective asked his friend. When he touched the hero's shoulder, the large man flinched, as if he came back from a trance. "Yeah, I'm fine, it's just..." "What's wrong? Could you and Doc give me a few minutes alone with him?" Naomasa and the detective exchanged a brief look before they nodded. "Take your time," said the man who dissected his enemy, as he and the detective made their way out of the room, and headed to the closest coffee machine. It was not a normal request, and a one which would normally be denied, but they both knew that if there was a person they could put their trust into, it was the number one hero. A few seconds after the door closed after them, All Might let out a sigh, and a small smile appeared on his face. "You want to know something?" he asked silently, and after being met by nothing but more silence he continued. "I really thought that it was my end." He locked his bright blue eyes with Shigaraki's lifeless ones. "When I was bleeding out on the floor, I thought that this is how I die. This is how one for all dies." His right hand slowly formed into a hard fist. "That the life of my master, and the lives of every previous holder, that they would be all for nothing." He took a step towards the glass on the wall, and looked at the empty room behind it. "You know, it was 2 or maybe 3 years ago when they called me here. I was standing just behind this glass, and they showed me a young dead hero. His face was beaten beyond recognition. He had no family, no close friends. It was just him, and his team. He was the only one of them that we found." He took a calming breath before continuing. All Might remembered the boy well. He had scars all over his body. They were the side effect of his quirk. Yet he didn't mind them too much. He went into a hero program, and worked through his pain, just so he could do an incredibly hard and dangerous job. People like that made even the number one hero feel small in comparison. Toshinori met the younger hero just 4 days before some police officer found his lifeless body under a large pine tree in a park. At that time the number one hero was the only one who could identify the core. "It's so hard to believe that you are here laying on the same table he did all those years ago, with pretty much the same face, and maybe even killed by the same people." All Might could see something poetic in what he just stated. It really showed how fickle the life of a villain was. "But the funny thing is, somewhere very deep inside, there is a very small part of me which almost wants to thank you," Toshinori admitted, as he pulled up a chair next to the table. "Before you almost killed me, I only had one thing, and that was my mission to find you, and to make sure that you don't hurt anyone ever again. But since I woke up in just a week, I no longer feel lonely, and now for the first time there are 2 people with one for all, and I strongly believe that the boy will one day become a much better and stronger hero than me." He said, as his smile disappeared. "During your entire life, all you did was hurt and manipulate people just to achieve your goals, but don't think your death changes anything. We will hunt down every single villain and criminal, and we won't stop until everyone in this world has the ability to smile. And I hope that you take that to your grave," All Might declared angrily, and roughly covered the dead man's face before leaving the room. It didn't take long for him to find the 2 men, and after some small amount of paperwork he was ready to leave, when the medical examiner approached him. "I hope you don't mind, but could I get an autograph for my son? He's a big fan of pro heroes." "Sure. What's his name?" All Might responded with his bright smile once again present on his face, as he took the offered pen and paper. "It's Fumikage. Dear Fumikage, always try your best, and you will be sure to succeed. Signed All Might." He swiftly wrote before he handed the short message back to the boy's father, and left the grim building, ready to begin a new part of his life. After the death of All For One, the case was quickly concluded, and even though the missing doctor was still at large, he was classified as a low-level threat without his boss. As you might have guessed, this meant that the Midoriyas were taken out of the protection program after the week it took for the paperwork to go through. This week has been different, especially for Inko. Sometimes when she met Toshinori in the penthouse, he gave her this weird nervous look, and after a short awkward conversation he quickly left. Everything reached a peak when there was only 1 day remaining. By that point All Might was doing pretty much anything just to avoid the green-haired woman, which is why Inko was so surprised when she heard someone knock on her door, when she was filling her large suitcase with clothes. "Come in," the woman said with a feeling of uncertainty manifesting itself in her voice. The door then opened, and revealed Toshinori with a strange twitching smile. It was a sight which unnerved her even more. "Oh my Toshinori, are you feeling okay? You look so tense. Is there something wrong?" she asked nervously, as she took a step forward. The number one hero was taken aback for a second, but quickly recovered. Even though before he had the chance to answer her question his hand shot up to his head, and started furiously rubbing an itch, which wasn't there to begin with. "Yes, no, wait, no, I mean yes, ugh, and I practiced this so many times. Wait, let me start over." All Might sighed tiredly. A faint smile briefly appeared on Inko's face before disappearing, as she looked at the floor sadly. "Maybe I know what you are trying to say." "You do?" "Yes, I think so. After all, you have been so patient with us." "Wait, patiently? I mean, you have to hate it that those people from the government forced you to let us live here, don't you?" "I am sorry," she said with an expression that could be only replicated by a kicked puppy, before lowering her head. All Might was so surprised by her words that his own just couldn't make their way out of his mind into his mouth. So, he just stared at her silently for a few seconds. No. When she heard that one word, she looked back at the blonde man questioningly. It's not like that, the number one hero said, and closed the distance between them. But why were you acting so weird? I hardly even saw you this week. I had to tell you something, and didn't want to mess it up. But every time I tried to bring it up, the words just scrambled every time I tried to speak with you. Just then Inko noticed how close the tall man was to her, and her face slightly reddened. I wanted to tell you that even after all this blows over, and even if there is zero chance of danger for you or for your son, you are both more than welcome to stay here. We can stay, a loud voice exclaimed from behind the door. It squeaked open, and Izuku stuck his head through. Izuku! It's very impolite to eavesdrop on other people. She reprimanded her son angrily, even though the green-haired boy seemed completely unaffected by her words, as he ran over to his mom, grasped her pant leg, and started jumping up and down with joy. Does it mean I can play Tenya and Momo again? Izuku asked hopefully. Both adults noticed just how bummed he looked when Inko told him that he would have to return back to his old kindergarten soon. But don't you miss Katsuki? I thought you two were friends. Izuku frowned for a second before answering. But Kaken has many friends, and he's always angry at me, the little green-haired boy sadly admitted. His mother first looked at the boy's sad yet somehow still hopeful expression, and then at All Might's face adorned by an honest smile. Inko sighed. She knew that Toshinori was everything but dishonest, but to move in with someone just like that. It was true that the big guy was one of the nicest people she had ever met, and her son absolutely adored him. It was also very nice to have someone at home she could talk to and trust. But living with the number one hero, it just seemed like too much to take in. Hey Izuku, could you bring me mommy her phone? It's in my bag. Sure, Mom. The green-haired boy yelled hurriedly, and ran to the living room. Once he left her room, Inko focused her attention back on Toshinori. Look, you are a really nice guy, and I appreciate your offer, but we can't stay here, she quietly said. After those words left her mouth, she saw something which was very rare. The hero's smile slowly left his face, and was promptly replaced by a disappointed frown. I see. But may I ask why? The tall man couldn't help himself. He needed to know what was wrong before he could even fathom losing his new roommates. Why? Just think about it. An unmarried woman, and her child living with an unmarried man who has the same quirk as her son. How do you think people will react to that? Is she worried about me? I don't want to cause you more trouble. The absurdity of this entire situation finally hit All Might, and he wanted to keep it down. But the entire penthouse was soon filled with his hearty laughter, which shocked Inko. I'm sorry, it's just that you are such a wonderful person. After a few more chuckles, the hero got his laughter under control. Her answer made him feel miserable. Toshinori feared that she found his energetic nature or maybe their conversations annoying, or that maybe she blamed him for the sudden presence of the government in both her and her son's lives. Yet it was this simple reason which only showed her selflessness more. Please take this seriously, the green-haired mother pleaded, clearly flustered by the hero's strange response. I do, but I am a hero because I love to make people feel safe, not for good press and PR. So if that is your only concern, then there is nothing to worry about, All Might declared happily, as his trademark smile returned to his face. Inko searched his face for any sign of dishonesty or nervousness, but there was nothing. The number one hero was completely frank with her. She looked around herself, as she again noticed the fanciness and luxury of the place around her. She always wanted her son to be brought up in a place like this with a strong role model he could look up to, but her meager salary, and the absence of her ex-husband was something she always saw as a gigantic impassable barrier to that goal. But now, that barrier was shattered by this single offer. But how can you be so nice? You barely even know me or my son, and yet you would welcome us to live with you? She asked after she sat down on her bed, and tried to wrap her head around the situation, which she was currently facing. I know it's a lot to take in, but I don't need your answer right now. Sleep on it, and tell me when you make your decision. Just please remember this. The time the three of us spent here, no matter how brief, is something I will treasure forever. And with that he left her room, and carefully closed the door behind himself. After that he made his way back to his own bedroom, and collapsed on his bed, and hid his blushing face in his arms from the feeling of embarrassment caused by the cheesiness of his own words. That night Inko hardly slept. She was busy thinking about the offer, but more importantly about her own thoughts. Why can't I just say yes? She knew that this was a serious offer, but there were also no strings attached, yet there was still something which held her back from accepting a better and easier life for her and for Izuku, yet she couldn't put her finger on it. The man was the manifestation of niceness, but he also made her feel a bit nervous whenever she tried talking to him, and he always looks so funny and cute while reasoning with Izuku. Come on, get yourself together. You are a single mother with a dead-end office job, and he's the #1 hero. It would never work, she said quietly to herself, and flipped over facing away from the window. But he wants us to stay, reminded her another thought. No, he doesn't. Toshinori is just very polite. After a while, and many similar thoughts, she was finally able to reach a dreamless slumber. Unbeknownst to her All Might, was just following a train of thoughts thematically very similar to her own, as he chased after a flying villain with biology comparable to a parrot through the night. Maybe I came on too strong, if only the damn geezer was any help at all. He took another leap from a random rooftop, as his mind drifted to what his short, bearded master told him 3 days ago. If you really like her, just put a baby in her, and the rest will resolve itself on its own. Those words still made All Might feel uncomfortable. The villain took a sharp turn into an alleyway, nearly losing the large plastic bag with stolen jewelry. This hover didn't slow the hero at all. He just turned around in the air, waited for the right moment, until his back was aimed straight at the other flying figure before. New Hampshire smash, he yelled, as he punched the air, which propelled him straight at the winged villain. Maybe I should just tell her that I like her. But his mind quickly rejected that thought, when he grabbed the brightly colored criminal by the wing, as he sailed past him, and sent them both tumbling from the midair straight into a tall hedgerow which stood around rather small hotel, just past the alleyway. Before the Birdman could make another escape attempt, Toshinori seized his feet with large sharp black talons, flipped him upside down, and began carrying him and the stolen property to the nearest police station whilst ignoring the man's protests, and his attempts to assault the #1 hero with his beak. With the dangerous situation already over, his mind drifted back to the green-haired woman. It was not that he was afraid to tell her, just that he had no idea how to tell her. Being a #1 hero was great, and all, but it hardly left him with any time for relationships. To be honest, the last time he dated someone was back in middle school before Nana scouted him. Now trying to flirt was like trying to start a car with no wheels, and covered in rust which has been standing in the driveway for 10 years. With the angry parrot delivered to a cage at the police station, All Might adjusted his blue cape, and resumed his patrol. The next day, when the hero returned, he spotted a good sign the moment he entered through the balcony. There were no bags or suitcases prepared, though his optimism was quickly put to the test, when he saw Inko in the living room nursing a cup of tea. She looked very tired and nervous, but as soon as she saw him, the woman quickly put down her cup and stood up. "Hello, Toshinori, want some tea?" she asked awkwardly, and made her way towards the kettle. "No, it's okay, I am not thirsty," he replied in a similar fashion, once again lacking the knowledge what to do with his hands. "Come on, pull yourself together. Today you dealt with a man-parrot robber, a woman with knives in place of her fingers holding a hostage, and some weird pervert trying to hypnotize young women with his pheromones. She's not gonna bite. So, I have given it some thought," and she started, as she put the kettle back down, leaving All Might nervous like a teenager on his first ever date. "Here comes the rejection. I thought, well, maybe we should try it and see how it goes. I mean, we can always leave whenever we want to, right?" She swiftly half-said, half-whispered, perfectly emulating her inner schoolgirl perfectly, and finished the performance with a nervous chuckle. The tall man was happy, relieved, and overjoyed by the news, but also panicky, because now he didn't know how to respond. So his brain did the weird bad thing only tired brains do. Funny you should say that. Tonight I found a wanted kidnapper who said exactly that to her victims. Then mid-word he noticed the look she was now giving him, and made himself stop. "And not that I'm saying that you look like a suspected felon. I just lost my mind because you are so pretty." If before he stepped on a rake, now he put his foot on an active landmine. Both adults froze once the word pretty left Toshinori's mouth, and silence enveloped the room. Both just looked at each other awkwardly for a few seconds, until All Might decided to put an end to this weird interaction, as quickly as possible. "Well, that was enough action for one day. I need to get some rest," he announced, and quickly made his way into his room. And so Inko was left in the kitchen with a single thought. Did that just happen? The situation between the two was awkward for the next few days, but luckily Izuku was always somehow able to diffuse the weird atmosphere, and soon the two adults started acting normal around each other again. Yet there was something that weighed heavily on the mind of the 4-year-old. He still remembered what he said to the scarred boy that night. "Let's talk later." It was almost like a promise, and he felt bad about the possibility of not being able to keep it, which is why he was now staring at a tourist map, which he had smuggled under his protective suit into the daycare, with Ida and Momo. It was useless though, since none of them knew how to read. After this failure his mood even worsened. He couldn't ask his mother for help, because Izuku knew that if she found out about this, she would be very angry, and probably even sad, and he didn't want to bother All Might either since the hero was very overworked since several big villains started fighting among each other. But then one day, there was a breakthrough in his search. "Your grandma's birthday?" asked Ida after hearing the news. "Yes. We are having a party, and Dad said that I can invite you too," she said excitedly, which made both boys smile after they exchanged a look and a nod. "Sure, of course we'll come," Izuku affirmed. The event took place after a few days, and it was as snobby and majestic as you can imagine. The three friends still had fun though. Momo's grandmother was a very gentle but energetic old lady, and when she met the two boys, each of them ended up with a pinch on the cheek and a piece of very expensive Belgian chocolate. There was even a large trampoline set up behind the house for the children, which they immediately fell in love with. And that's how they spent most of the party, jumping up and down and giggling like there was no tomorrow. That was until Izuku activated his quirk by mistake and made a jump so high it let him see over the mansion's hedge and the entire garden. It allowed him to catch a glimpse of the house he was searching for, just a few blocks away. The next second he fell back down from the sky with a loud crash and a creak from the trampoline. "Are you okay?" asked Ida nervously, as both him and Momo rushed over to him, but Izuku quickly stood back up, looking perfectly fine. "I saw the house, it's this way," the green-haired boy said, and excitedly pointed in the direction of the house. His friends were at first skeptical, but when they saw the boy's excitement, they knew that he wasn't making it up. "I have to see him," announced Izuku with determination. Ida and Momo exchanged a worried look before turning their attention back to the green-haired boy. "Izuku, you can't do that, you would get in so much trouble." Tenya tried to reason with him with little to no success. The shorter boy just flinched for a fraction of a second, and then steeled himself. "But I really have to, so I gave him a promise," declared the boy. But before he could do anything stupid, the girl spoke up. "But if you do that, everyone will look for you, and it will ruin Grandma's birthday," she pleaded, but this time the boy's determination slowly drained from his face. He suddenly looked extremely disappointed, and it almost seemed like he would start crying out of frustration. But then an idea appeared in his mind. What if I bring him here? He tried again, and this time, his friends didn't look so concerned, yet the boy with glasses was already preparing to reason with Izuku yet before he could utter a single word. "That could work," said Momo. "Impossible! You are with him?" Ida exclaimed, and started accusingly pointing his arms at both of them. "Come on, Tenya. It will be fine." Izuku tried to calm his panicking bespectacled friend. "No, it won't. They will find out about what we did, and then we will end up in the prison for juveniles, where there is no candy," Ida exclaimed, his panic from potentially breaking the rules reaching an entirely different level. "So will you help us?" asked Izuku, as both him and Momo deployed their strongest puppy dog eyes. Ida stared at them defiantly, but inside he was slowly beginning to melt. He knew that these two were his only real friends, and his brother once said to him that a real hero must never turn his back on a true friend. His firm expression slowly broke down. "Fine, but if we get grounded, I am holding both of you responsible," he announced, pointing his hands at them, which only made both of his friends smile. And so, the group started planning. First, they found an empty paper plate, and started drawing on it with crayons from Momo's room. The plan was simple. They would create a fake Izuku, using Momo's quirk, and then use the doppelganger to make everyone believe that the boy was still present, whilst Midoriya would somehow sneak out, and bring back the boy with him so they could hang out like promised. The figurine created out of the upper half of an armless mannequin they found in the attic was hardly convincing, but when armed with the green wig provided by Momo, Izuku's t-shirt, and shorts, which he thankfully didn't need since he was also wearing his protective suit, and his face masterfully drawn on it by Ida, it could be mistaken for the boy from the right distance. And so they took the abomination into a secluded part of the garden, and hid it behind a bush where it was hardly visible, while the two actual children made it look as if they were playing hide and seek, failing to find the green-haired boy. Said boy was meanwhile furiously trying to find a way to sneak out. The gate of the manor, which belonged to Yorisis, was currently closed, and under surveillance from a single guard. The fence was too high to climb over. This meant that to be successful, he would need to use his quirk somehow, but he had no idea how to jump there and get back with the red and white-haired boy. But his dilemma was answered when he found a big old red rusted wheelbarrow without any wheels, and remembered the chair accident. With that thought in mind, he sat into the broken piece of gardening equipment. "Now fly," he shouted, and at the same time slapped the rusty metal, yet it remained stationary. "Come on, how do I do this?" Maybe that breathing no weight that was supposed to make it stop. Izuku then had an idea to get out of the piece of junk, and check if it wasn't stuck to the ground or something, and just when he did reach over the edge, and touch the soft ground for support, The old piece of trash suddenly flipped right under him, and trapped him in a metal cocoon. Feeling scared of the dark, he panicked, and tried to push the thing up, but the moment his fingertip made contact with the wheelbarrow it took off upside down, straight into the sky without him. He watched in terror, as the red shape quickly disappeared in clouds. "No, no, no! Get back here!" he shouted, and made a step back trying to get a better look, only to trip over a branch, and fall to the ground. Then right when he felt his hand touch the soft grass, the flying object appeared again, and this time it was actually coming straight at him with blinding speed, and a yellowish-red trail of fire behind it. Izuku tried to crawl back, but the thing just adjusted its trajectory, and remained aimed straight at him, and quickly closed the distance. The green-haired boy screamed, and put his hands up, trying to protect himself, but the pain didn't come. Instead, the still red-hot piece of metal stopped just a foot away from the boy's face, and sent a gust of warm air at him. Izuku stared at the object, his green eyes filled with distrust, yet the hovering object was looking just as innocent as when he found it. The boy took a step back, and the thing followed. He took a step towards it, and it flew away from him. "Okay, how do I make this work?" he thought, as he put his hand on his chin. And the thing slowly rose with his hand. After obtaining this new knowledge, he tried moving his hand down, and the wheelbarrow softly touched down. "That is so awesome!" And then he felt it. It was almost like an invisible thread from his hand connected to the object. Whenever he spun his hand, the thing turned to one side or the other. Whenever he moved his hand forward, the thing moved away, and so on. He spent about a few minutes experimenting like this until he found out that when he closed his hand into a fist, the wheelbarrow stopped responding, and when he opened it just a little, the piece of metal moved much slower. He knew it was ready for a test drive. Meanwhile, at the Todoroki abode, Shoto was recovering from his brutal training by the window. Ever since his eye fully recovered, his dad was pushing him harder than ever. His entire body was screaming at him from exhaustion, and he felt the need to lie down and rest, but the boy resisted the urge. He would not let his father defeat him like this ever again. The man in question left just half an hour ago to go on his patrol. The boy with dual quirk closed his eyes for a minute to give them some rest, only to open them in shock just a few seconds later, as something gently nudged his shoulder. His eyes swiftly focused at the hand, and then at the boy connected to it. He nearly fell over when he saw the face framed by green hair looking at him. "Izuku?" He was surprised when he came back to his senses. He also noticed a great amount of leaves and small pieces of branches stuck in the short boy's hair. "Hello? Come outside," urged the green-haired boy happily with a small wave, as he touched down in the front yard. Shoto rushed outside to see the other boy cough up a few small leaves into his hand, which he quickly threw over his shoulder, and focused his attention back on him. Young Todoroki looked at the green-haired boy from head to toe, then at the red wheelbarrow, and a question appeared in his mind, one which he didn't wait long to share. "Are you an alien?" he blurted out, and earned himself a surprised look. "No, I am not," he said defensively, then stopped himself, and started muttering something about being an alien, and not knowing about it, which quickly made the other boy smile, even though he had a feeling that if he didn't stop him, a much more important question would remain unaddressed. "Why are you here anyway? If Dad finds you here, he will get really mad," Todoroki said, as he quickly looked around, worried that someone was watching them, even though his older siblings would probably not rat him out. The same couldn't be said for the caretaker. "I'm here for you. Do you want to come play out with us?" the green-haired boy asked with a friendly smile on his face. "What do you mean? I can't just leave like that," Shoto protested. He felt stunned that the other boy even said something like that. "There is a birthday party not far away, and I came to invite you," Izuku explained, as he shyly offered his hand to help the taller boy into his makeshift airplane. It was not that Shoto didn't celebrate birthdays, they did, but it could hardly be called a party. There were a few presents exchanged, and each one of his siblings, as well as his mom, wished him a happy birthday, but that was about it. "Hey, don't worry, I will get you back home, I promise," Izuku happily encouraged when he saw his hesitation. Todoroki gave the boy a doubtful look. He was experiencing an extremely weird feeling, even though he barely even knew the boy. The scarred boy felt as if he could somehow trust him. There was just no malicious intent in his green eyes, just an unnatural amount of excitement. And so, he took the offered hand, and stepped in the strange vehicle. "Okay, just hold on tight. I don't know how this works." "Wait, what do you mean?" Though the question died on his lips, when the wheelbarrow swiftly took off. Shoto was holding on for dear life, as the object zigzagged through the air. Luckily his quirk allowed him to create a handlebar of ice. A few moments later, Shoto opened his eyes, which he closed when they came face to face with a large tree just a few seconds ago, and luckily, they were on the ground, even though that didn't stop his hands from shaking. "You are crazy," he forced out, still shaking like a chihuahua, as he left the previously flying object. He then took a look at his pilot, which nearly made him laugh, since Izuku was now sporting a large green beard from all the leaves that got stuck to his face during landing. The boys reduced the mess on their clothes and hair as much as possible, and began to make their way back to the birthday party. They didn't get very far. "Izuku!" shouted Ida when he saw his friend approaching. He and Momo quickly hurried over to him, only to come face to face with a boy they had never seen before. "Hi guys!" Tenya nearly missed his friend's greetings, as his eyes narrowed when he saw the boy with the scar. "Izuku, you are kidding, right? We can bring this guy with us, look at him!" The highest of them exclaimed, as he swiftly closed the distance between. "What's your problem?" Shoto was clearly affected by what the bespectacled boy said. Yet the boy with blue hair ignored this, and walked right up to him. "Well, if you are not gonna do it, then I have to," said Ida, and even though Todoroki wasn't sure about what Tenya was talking, he understood that this guy was looking for a fight, and he also knew that after today's training he had no real way to protect himself. It surprised him greatly when the tall boy dropped on his knee, and swiftly retied his shoelaces before pulling a hairbrush out of his pocket, and fixing his two-colored hair. "Okay, all better," Tenya announced, turned around, and began walking to the party. "He just does that sometimes," Izuku informed Todoroki, when he noticed his confusion. "Why doesn't he brush your hair?" Shoto asked, as they also began walking again. "Because his bed hair is unfixable," declared Ida, clearly frustrated by the fact. Luckily there were enough children at the party that no one noticed it when one more was added into the mix, and so right after Shoto introduced himself the newly formed quartet was free to play as many games, and eat as many sweets as they wanted. This was all completely new for the young Todoroki, but he soon understood that people chasing after him in the game of tag were not trying to attack him, or that hide and seek was no secret ploy to get rid of him. For the first time in his short life, he felt truly happy. It was so much fun hanging out with this group of other kids, that the entire afternoon passed in the blink of an eye. Izuku honored his promise, and just as the guests began to leave, he managed to sneak Shoto back home, this time slightly more skillfully. It was hard to say goodbye to his new friends, but thanks to another promise from the green-haired boy, he was absolutely sure he would meet them again. The situation didn't change too much at the penthouse, and the Midoriya family decided to stay for another week. Inko returned back to her office job since she didn't want to be just a freeloader, and after a month both her and Tashinori found enough courage to share their feelings for each other, which only grew over time. Then after another week they began openly dating. Even though there was some media coverage of this, the public soon accepted the fact that the number one hero was no longer single. After half a year Inko even sold her old apartment, and after a year the group of roommates began living like a proper family. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.